I didn't find out the way people imagine. There wasn't a lipstick mark on a collar or a stray perfume cloud in the passenger seat. There wasn't a dramatic midnight phone call or a stranger knocking at my door. My name is Charlotte, and I thought I knew what my life was: steady, loyal, and finally safe after years of trying to build it. It started with a small sound. A notification chime, soft and bright, on a phone that wasn't mine. I remember the exact second because I was standing at our kitchen sink, rinsing a mug that still smelled like chamomile. The window over the sink was fogged at the edges from the dishwasher steam, and outside, February rain was tapping the porch rail in slow, patient rhythms. My husband's phone, face down on the counter, buzzed once and chimed. Just one. Normally, I would never touch it. We had that kind of marriage, the kind where privacy was treated like trust and trust was treated like air. You didn't grab it because you didn't need to. But the screen lit up before the phone went dark again, and for a heartbeat the notification was visible, bright white letters on black glass. Can't stop thinking about last night. No name, just the message preview. My hands were wet. My sleeves were pushed up. My heart did something strange and hollow, like it had forgotten its job for a second. I stared at the phone as if it could explain itself. Then I did what I've always done when something feels wrong. I tried to make it right in my mind before I made it real. Maybe it was a coworker being inappropriate and he'd shut it down. Maybe it was some dumb group chat. Maybe it was a text meant for someone else. Maybe the words didn't mean what they looked like they meant. I dried my hands slowly, too slowly. I could hear my husband upstairs, the faint sound of a drawer closing, the muted thump of his footsteps. He was getting dressed for work. He had a meeting in Boston, he'd said, a quick turnaround trip. One night, back the next evening. We lived outside Providence, in a quiet neighborhood where the lawns were more gravel and moss than grass in winter. The kind of place where people waved without meaning anything by it. Where the sound of a garage door was a daily marker of time. Where you could tell who was out of town by whether their porch lights stayed on past midnight. My name is Charlotte, and I used to think my life was simple in the best way. I was 36, a hospice nurse with a steady schedule and a steady heart. I sat with people in the quiet hours and held their hands and listened to their last stories. I had learned how to be calm when things fell apart. My husband, Ethan, was 39. He worked in logistics for a regional medical supply company, the kind of job that sounded bland until you realized it was the reason hospitals didn't run out of gloves and for tubing. He traveled a lot, not glamorous travel, just airports and rental cars and hotel rooms that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner. And my sister. My sister was Violet. Violet was 34 and lived in Hartford, Connecticut, about an hour and a half away if traffic behaved. She was the kind of person who made a room feel warmer simply by being in it. She laughed with her whole body. She remembered birthdays. She cried easily and apologized for it even when she didn't need to. For most of my life, Violet had been my person. Not just my sister. My person. When our mother died 5 years earlier, Violet had slept on my couch for 3 weeks because she said she couldn't be alone in her apartment. When I went through my first brutal year as a hospice nurse, Violet had shown up at my door with soups and new pens and fuzzy socks, like she could buffer the world with softness. And then Violet's world had cracked open. It was the infertility first. The quiet beginning, the hopeful beginning. The spreadsheets and ovulation tests and polite smiles at baby showers that were getting harder to attend. The way she tried to laugh about it, like if she made it a joke she could outrun the grief. Then it was the adoption. They'd been matched once, and Violet called me sobbing, voice shaking with joy. She'd said, "Char, we're going to be parents. I'm finally going to be someone's mom." And then the match fell through. The expectant mother changed her mind, which was her right, but Violet didn't know how to hold that kind of rightness alongside her own devastation. She stopped answering her phone for a week. She went to work and came home and sat in the dark. Her marriage didn't survive it. Her husband, Colin, tried. I'll give him that. He tried in the beginning. But there's a particular kind of strain that comes when grief becomes the third person in the marriage bed. Violet couldn't stop talking about it, and Colin couldn't stand hearing about it. She wanted to process. He wanted to forget. She wanted to plan again. He wanted to stop. One night, after months of tension, Colin said something cruel. Something about how maybe it was a sign Violet wasn't meant to be a mother. Violet slapped him. Colin left. And then there was the divorce that felt inevitable and still shocking. During all of it, I showed up. I paid for therapy copays when Violet's insurance was a mess. I sent grocery deliveries when she wouldn't leave the house. I drove down to Hartford on my days off and sat on her living room floor while she cried until she had nothing left. I didn't just support her emotionally. I supported her financially, too, in the way you do when you see someone you love slipping under and you don't know what else to throw them. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was what sisters did. I told myself we were a team. Violet used to call me her anchor. She said I made her feel like she wasn't floating away. I believed her. So when that notification chimed on Ethan's phone, my mind didn't go to Violet. It didn't go anywhere near Violet. It went to a faceless woman, a stranger, someone in a city Ethan traveled to. Anyone but the person whose name was stitched into the softest parts of my history. Ethan came downstairs a few minutes later wearing his gray sweater and his travel coat, hair damp from the shower. He kissed me on the forehead, the way he always did, like a stamp of normalcy. "You're up early," he said. I had a patient pass at 4, I said automatically, because it was true and because it gave me something to hold. Couldn't get back to sleep. "I'm sorry," he murmured, and he meant it in that general way people mean it when they know your job is heavy, but they can't carry it for you. He reached for his phone without looking at it, slid it into his pocket. "Coffee?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. He poured himself some anyway. The kitchen smelled like dark roast and rain. He drank it standing up, scrolling through his phone with one thumb, expression blank in the way it always was when he was reading. I watched him. I watched his mouth, the little line it made when he was concentrating. I watched his hands, steady and unhurried. I watched for something that looked like guilt. Nothing. He finished his coffee and set the mug in the sink like we were still the same people we'd been yesterday. Like I hadn't seen those words. "You okay?" he asked, and his eyes flicked to mine, and for a second I thought maybe he knew. Maybe he'd seen something in my face. "I'm tired," I said. He nodded, satisfied with the explanation. Then he hugged me, long enough to feel intimate, short enough to feel practical. "I'll text when I land," he said. "Okay," I said. He left. The front door clicked shut. His car started. The tires hissed on the wet driveway. And I stood in the kitchen with my hands curled around the edge of the counter, listening to the rain, thinking about a sentence on a glass screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. I did something that surprised me then. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call Violet. I didn't call anyone. I opened my laptop. I work in hospice, and hospice teaches you that panic doesn't help. Panic burns energy you'll need later. When something is wrong, you gather information. You stay calm. You take notes. You move slowly so you don't make mistakes you can't undo. So I started gathering information. First, I tried to reason with myself. Ethan traveled. He had friends. He had colleagues. Last night could mean dinner, could mean a conversation, could mean nothing. But that message had a texture to it. It wasn't about a meeting. It wasn't about a joke. It was intimate, even without context. I logged into our phone carrier account. We shared one, because it was cheaper and because we'd never needed separate walls in our marriage. The call logs were there. The text logs were there, too, at least the numbers, not the content. A number I didn't recognize appeared again and again. Hartford area code. My stomach turned in a slow, deliberate way, like a door opening on a long hallway. Hartford. I stared at the list of numbers until the screen blurred. My mind tried to build a bridge to some reasonable explanation. Maybe Violet was texting Ethan about something. Maybe she needed help moving furniture. Maybe she'd asked him for advice about a car. Maybe she'd called him in a moment of crisis, and he'd been a good brother-in-law. But the frequency didn't match that. The calls weren't just occasional. They were constant. And the timing. Late at night. Early morning. During his business trips. During times Violet had told me she was sleeping or off her phone. I copied the number into my contacts search. Nothing. Then I did the thing that made my hands go cold. I typed the number into my phone and hit Add to Contacts, Then I opened the messaging app and waited for it to suggest a name. It did. Violet. I sat so hard on the kitchen chair that the legs squeaked. My mouth tasted metallic, like I'd bitten my tongue. For a moment, I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. I stared at the screen where my sister's name sat next to a phone number like it belonged there. My sister. My husband. The room didn't spin. It didn't tilt. Instead, everything sharpened. The edges of the countertop. The sound of the refrigerator humming. The rain. I remember thinking, very calmly, that my life had just split into two timelines. The one where I didn't know. The one where I did. In hospice, people talk about how grief feels unreal, like you're watching someone else's life through a window. That's what it felt like then. Like I was Charlotte, watching Charlotte. I kept going because stopping would mean falling apart. I clicked through more logs. More dates. More calls. Nearly a year. Not just during Ethan's trips either. There were calls on weekends when Violet was supposedly visiting friends. Calls on nights Ethan told me he was too tired and went to bed early. Calls on days Violet had been at my house for dinner and hugged me goodbye. I thought about every time Violet had looked me in the eye and told me she loved me. I thought about every time Ethan had kissed my forehead and told me he'd text when he landed. I kept thinking there had to be something else. Some misunderstanding. Some secret project, like a surprise party. But my body didn't believe that. My body knew something my mind was still trying to negotiate with. I called Violet. It went to voicemail. I texted her, "Hey, can you call me when you get a chance?" A few minutes later, she texted back, "In a meeting." "Everything okay?" "In a meeting." On a Thursday morning. Violet worked as a social media manager for a small nonprofit. She didn't have meetings like that, not the kind that made her too busy to call her sister. "Everything okay?" I stared at the words. I could feel the weight of them. I typed, "Just want to check in. Miss you." She responded with a heart emoji. I set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. Then I did the most unromantic, practical thing I've ever done in my life. I opened a spreadsheet. Dates. Times. Duration. Ethan's trips. Violet's busy days. I made columns for everything. I told myself I wasn't doing it because I wanted proof. I told myself I was doing it because I needed to know if I was going crazy. But it was proof. It was evidence. It was the first brick in a wall I hadn't known I would need. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved through my life like a person carrying a glass of water through a crowded room. Careful. Steady. Smiling when I needed to. Ethan texted when he landed in Boston. He sent a photo of a gray hotel room view, like he always did, as if showing me the skyline was a way of staying connected. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji because I couldn't bring myself to type words that sounded like love. Violet called me twice during that period, both times when Ethan was home, both times with her voice bright and slightly too fast. "Hey, Char," she said, like nothing was wrong. I kept my voice calm. "Hey, how are you?" "I'm good," she said quickly. "Busy. Just wanted to hear your voice." That sentence. Just wanted to hear your voice. It hit me like a slap. I wanted to say, "You hear his voice plenty." I wanted to say, "How do you live with yourself?" Instead I said, "I'm glad you called." My throat felt tight. My hands shook when I hung up. Ethan went on another trip. Then another. Always Boston. Always Hartford-adjacent connections. Always plausible. I checked the logs every night. Sometimes I checked them twice. And then, on a Monday afternoon, Violet showed up at my house without warning. I was in scrubs, home early because a patient's family had asked for a different nurse for the evening shift. I'd been grateful for the unexpected break, thinking I'd take a bath, maybe do laundry, maybe pretend for a few hours that my life wasn't quietly on fire. The doorbell rang. When I opened the door and saw Violet on my porch, I had a physical reaction, like my lungs clenched. She stood there holding a tote bag, hair tucked behind her ears, eyes too shiny. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was small. Of course, my sister had been fragile before. Violet had always carried her emotions close to the surface. But this wasn't that. This was a different kind of fragility, the kind that comes when someone is bracing for impact. I stepped aside. "Yeah, come in." She walked into my living room like she didn't know where to put her feet. Like the house was unfamiliar even though she'd been here 100 times. She set her tote bag down by the couch and stood with her hands clasped together. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't offer her water. I just watched her waiting. She took a breath, then another. Her shoulders rose and fell like she was trying to force her body into calm. "Charlotte," she said, and hearing my full name from her made my skin prickle. "What's going on?" I asked. She looked at me like she wanted to say something and couldn't. Like the words were too sharp to hold. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. A cold, steady calm slid over me. It wasn't peace. It was a coping mechanism. It was the part of my mind that had sat with families as they heard the word terminal and watched them fracture, and knew how to keep my voice even in the middle of disaster. "What didn't you mean?" I asked. Her eyes filled. She blinked hard, trying not to cry, like crying would make it too real. "I'm pregnant," she said. The air in the room seemed to change, like pressure shifting before a storm. For a second, there was an almost automatic reaction in me, the sister reaction. The old reaction. Violet had wanted this so badly. Violet had suffered so much. My mouth opened and then closed again. Because Violet's face wasn't hopeful. It was guilty. And because I already knew, deep down, exactly what she was going to say next. "I'm 3 months," she whispered. I didn't move. I didn't sit. I didn't speak. Violet's hands were trembling. She pressed one palm lightly to her stomach, almost unconsciously, as if she was trying to reassure herself it was real. "Charlotte," she said again. "Please don't look at me like that." "How am I looking at you?" I asked. She swallowed. "Like you hate me." I stared at her. My mind felt strangely empty. Like it was too tired to be surprised. "Who's the father?" I asked, even though the question was a formality. Even though we both knew I knew. Violet's mouth trembled. "It just happened." "That's not an answer," I said softly. She took a step toward me, then stopped. "You have to understand, Char, I wasn't okay. After everything with Colin, after the adoption." "Who's the father?" I asked again. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked like a child who'd broken something precious and wanted someone else to fix it. "It's Ethan," she said. The sentence landed with a dull thud, not like an explosion, more like something heavy dropping onto a table. My body went still. My hands went cold. I nodded once, slowly, as if acknowledging a fact in a medical chart. Violet started crying immediately, like the words had been holding back the flood. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you." I heard her, but it was like hearing a voice through water. "Ethan. My husband. My sister." "And you're pregnant," I said, my voice flat. Violet nodded, tears running down her cheeks. "I didn't know how to tell you. I kept thinking it would go away. Or I don't know. I don't know what I thought." I watched her cry, and what shocked me was how little sympathy I felt. Not because I was cruel, but because sympathy had been burned out of me by the weeks of quiet investigation. By the knowledge that this wasn't a single mistake. This was a year. A year of calls and lies and secret meetings. "How long?" I asked. Violet wiped her face with her sleeve, like a teenager. "Since last spring. A year." My spreadsheet column confirmed it in my head. She shook her head quickly, as if trying to shake off the memory. "It started when Ethan came to Hartford for work. He was stressed, and I was lonely, and we just talked. At first it was just talking. I felt my jaw tighten. And then it wasn't," she whispered. She looked down at her hands. "I didn't plan it. I didn't go after him. He came to me." That sentence. He came to me. It was like she'd thrown a rope out, trying to pull Ethan into the blame so she wouldn't drown alone. I didn't bite. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Violet looked up quickly, eyes wide. "I want you to understand." "No," I said quietly. "That's not what you want." She flinched. "You didn't drive here to Hartford to confess because you suddenly grew a conscience," I continued. My voice was still calm, and it scared me a little how calm it was. "You came because you're pregnant and you can't hide it anymore." Violet sobbed harder. Charlotte, please, she said. Please don't do this. Do what? I asked. Don't make me the villain, she whispered, as if that was the most unbearable part. I stared at her, and something in my chest cracked, but not in the way she expected. It wasn't pity. It was realization. The full, bright understanding that Violet wasn't just someone who had made a mistake. She was someone who still believed the world should bend around her pain. Violet took a shaky breath. I know this sounds crazy, she said, voice trembling, but it feels like maybe it was meant to happen. I blinked slowly. What did you just say? Her eyes were pleading, frantic. Like the universe. Like after everything I went through, after losing the adoption, after the divorce. This is like a sign. Like I'm finally. I held up a hand. No, I said, very softly. She stopped, frozen. I will not let you turn this into a miracle story, I said. I will not let you dress betrayal up as destiny. Violet's mouth opened, and for a second she looked genuinely confused, as if she'd expected me to eventually come around, to see the meaning in it. Because that's who Violet had always been. She looked for meaning. She looked for signs. She looked for stories where pain led to something beautiful. But this wasn't pain leading to something beautiful. This was her choosing to hurt me. I thought, she whispered, I thought you would. I don't know. I thought you would be angry, but I thought eventually you'd understand. You always understand me. That, more than anything, made my stomach churn. Because she was right. I had always understood her. I had always made room for her. And that was why she thought she could take my husband and still ask for my compassion. I walked past her toward the kitchen. My legs felt steady, which seemed impossible. I opened a drawer and took out my phone charger because my phone battery was low and I had a sudden, sharp need to make sure I could call someone if I needed to. Violet followed me, hovering in the doorway. What did Ethan say? I asked. Violet hesitated. He doesn't want to lose you. A laugh escaped me, short and humorless. Then he shouldn't have been inside my sister. Violet flinched as if I'd slapped her. Don't talk like that, she whispered. I turned to look at her. You want me to talk like what, Violet? Like it's a misunderstanding? Like you tripped and fell into his bed? She shook her head, crying again. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was, I said. Tell me exactly how you decided it was okay. Violet sank onto a kitchen chair like her legs gave out. She pressed her hands over her face. I was so lonely, she whispered. You don't understand what it's like to want something so badly and have it taken away. My throat tightened. I thought about the dozens of nights I'd held her while she cried. The money I'd sent. The hours I'd driven down and back. The way I'd made space in my life for her grief. I understand loneliness, I said quietly. I understand loss. That's my job. I sit with it every day. She looked up, eyes red. Then why can't you understand me? Because understanding isn't permission, I thought. Because grief isn't a license. But I didn't say that. I just stood there, feeling the cold clarity settle deeper into my bones. Is Ethan coming home tonight? I asked. Violet swallowed. Yes. He said he'd come. Of course he did. Of course he knew. Of course they'd planned this. Violet had arrived here not just with guilt, but with strategy. A little part of me wanted to scream. Another part of me, the hospice part, the part that knew you needed information before you made decisions, just kept moving. Okay, I said. Violet looked up quickly. Okay. I nodded. He can come. We'll talk. Her shoulders sagged with relief, and for a second I saw it, clear as day. She thought this was the beginning of a resolution. She thought this was the part of the story where Charlotte, the steady sister, would absorb the shock and then make everything manageable. She was wrong. When Ethan came home that evening, the house felt like it was holding its breath. He walked in with his suitcase rolling behind him, hair wind-tossed, face tired. He froze when he saw Violet sitting on my couch, eyes swollen. Then he looked at me. And I saw it. The flicker of calculation. The split-second assessment of what Violet had told me, how much I knew, how he needed to respond. I didn't know she was coming, he said quickly. Violet sniffed, wiping her nose. I nodded once, as if we were discussing a schedule change. Sit, I said. Ethan set his suitcase down slowly. Charlotte, Sit, I repeated. He sat in the armchair opposite Violet, posture stiff, hands clasped together. He looked like a man preparing for a meeting with HR, not a man who'd betrayed his wife. I stood between them, my arms crossed, feeling like I was watching a strange play. Tell me, I said. Ethan swallowed. She told you. Yes, I said. But I want to hear it from you. Ethan's eyes flicked to Violet, then back to me. It was a mistake. How long? I asked. He hesitated. It wasn't. How long? I repeated. He exhaled. Almost a year. My spreadsheet column confirmed it again in my head, like a drumbeat. And you're sleeping with my sister, I said, and she's pregnant. Ethan's face tightened. I didn't want this. Violet let out a small sob, offended by the phrasing. I didn't want any of this, Ethan added quickly. Charlotte, I love you. I don't love her. Violet made a broken sound. I stared at him. So you used her. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. No, it's not like that. Then what is it like? I asked. Ethan rubbed his forehead. It started when I was traveling. I was stressed. We were distant. Violet was there. Violet's head snapped up. I was there. Ethan flinched. That's not what I meant. I watched them, the way they slipped into an argument like a couple who had practiced blaming each other. I realized then, with a quiet disgust, that I wasn't their main relationship anymore. I was the obstacle. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I'm going to record this, I said. Ethan's eyes widened. What? I'm recording, I repeated calmly. Because I'm not going to be gaslit later. I'm not going to have you rewrite this story when you're trying to save your image. Violet looked terrified. Ethan looked angry. Charlotte, he said, voice tight, you don't need to do that. I do, I said. I hit record. The red dot appeared on the screen. Ethan, I said, voice level, tell me what happened. Ethan stared at the phone, then at me. His jaw worked. It was an affair, he said finally. It started last spring. It happened when I came through Hartford for work. It continued. We met when I traveled. We talked constantly. And? I prompted. Anne. Violet is pregnant, he said, and his voice cracked slightly. Do you love her? I asked. Ethan shook his head quickly. No, I don't. I love you. I don't know what I was thinking. Do you regret it? I asked. Yes, he said immediately. Yes, I regret it. Do you regret the pregnancy? I asked, and I watched Violet's face as I said it. Ethan hesitated, and in that hesitation was a whole truth. He glanced at Violet, then back at me. He started. Violet's eyes were pleading now, as if she could force him into saying something tender. Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't want it to happen, he said quietly. Violet's face collapsed. I felt something cold settle fully into place inside me. Because whatever romantic story Violet had been telling herself, Ethan wasn't in it. He wasn't proud. He wasn't joyful. He was afraid of consequences. I turned the recording off. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. The room was silent except for Violet's shaky breathing. Ethan leaned forward. Charlotte, we can fix this. I looked at him. Can we? I asked softly. He nodded vigorously. Yes. We go to counseling. We work through it. Violet. Don't say her name like she's a problem to manage, I said. Ethan's mouth snapped shut. Violet whispered, what about me? Ethan didn't look at her. I watched my sister in that moment, watched the way she realized she wasn't the chosen one in this story. And I felt a strange, distant pity. Not because she deserved it, but because she had destroyed her life for a man who was already trying to back away from her. I took a breath. Then I said, I'm calling Mom and Dad. Both of them jolted. Violet's eyes went wide. Charlotte, no. Ethan's face tightened. That's not necessary. It is, I said. Because I knew something about secrets. In hospice, families keep them all the time. They think they're protecting each other. They think silence is mercy. But secrets rot people from the inside. I wasn't going to rot for them. I stepped into the hallway and called my father. He answered on the third ring, voice warm. Charlotte? Everything okay? My throat tightened, but my voice stayed steady. Dad, I need you and Mom to come over tonight. There was a pause. What's wrong? I'll tell you when you get here, I said. Please. It's important. He heard something in my tone. We'll be there in an hour. When I went back into the living room, Ethan and Violet were sitting like statues. Violet whispered, "Please don't do this." I looked at her, really looked at her. The sister who had slept on my couch, who had called me her anchor. "You already did this," I said quietly. "I'm just ending it." She started crying again, shoulders shaking. Ethan stood up, agitated. "Charlotte, your parents don't need to be involved." "They're already involved," I said. "You involved them when you involved Violet." Ethan's face flushed. "We can handle this privately." I shook my head. "No. You want to handle it privately so you can control the narrative. I'm done being controlled." Ethan stared at me like he didn't recognize me. And that was the moment I realized something else. He had never expected me to be the kind of woman who could be done. My parents arrived exactly 57 minutes later. I know because I checked the clock 3 times while I paced the hallway like a ghost in my own house. The rain had picked up, turning the street lights into blurry halos. The porch light threw a pale cone over the wet steps, and when I saw my father's SUV pull into the driveway, my stomach did a slow roll like it was bracing for turbulence. Ethan stood in the living room with his hands shoved into his pockets, shoulders tense. Violet had moved to the far end of the couch, curled in on herself, eyes red and swollen. She looked small, but she didn't look innocent. She looked like someone waiting for a verdict. When the doorbell rang, Ethan took one step forward like he might intercept them. I held up a hand. "No," I said quietly. He stopped. I opened the door, and my mother and father stepped inside, shaking rain from their coats. My mother's hair was pinned back, neat as always, her face already worried. My father's brows were drawn together. "Charlotte," my mother said, reaching for my hands. "What's going on?" I didn't let her hold me for long. I loved her too much to fall apart in her arms. If I started shaking, I wasn't sure I'd stop. "I need you both to sit," I said. My father's gaze traveled past me into the living room. He saw Ethan. He saw Violet. His eyes narrowed. "Why is Violet here?" Violet lifted her head slightly, like a guilty kid who's been caught sneaking in after curfew. My mother's expression softened automatically, the way it always did when Violet looked like she might cry. "Honey, are you okay?" Violet's mouth trembled. "Hi, Mom." I watched that exchange with a strange detachment. I watched my mother's instinct to comfort, my father's instinct to assess. And I thought, this is how we become who we are. Violet, always rescued. Me, always steady. My parents sat on the love seat. Ethan stayed standing until my father looked at him and said, flatly, "Sit down." Ethan sat in the armchair again, posture stiff. Violet remained on the couch, fingers knotted together. I stood near the fireplace, the only one not seated, because I didn't feel like I deserved comfort. I felt like comfort had been stolen. My father's voice was clipped. "Charlotte, tell us." I took a breath. My heart hammered, but my voice came out calm. Too calm. "Ethan and Violet have been having an affair," I said. "For almost a year." My mother made a sound like air being punched out of her. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father didn't move at first. He stared at me like he was waiting for me to correct myself. Like he believed he'd misheard. "What did you say?" he asked low. I didn't blink. "They've been sleeping together." Silence filled the room, thick as smoke. My mother turned to Violet. "Violet." Violet started crying immediately, as if tears could soften what she'd done. "Mom, My father's voice cut through it. "Stop." Violet froze. My father looked at Ethan. His eyes were sharp, bright with something I'd rarely seen in him, pure, unfiltered disgust. "Is this true?" he asked. Ethan swallowed. "Yes, sir." My father's jaw tightened. "Don't call me sir. You've been in my home. At my table." Ethan's face flushed. "I know. I'm sorry." My father's gaze snapped to Violet. "And you?" Violet's voice was small. "I'm sorry." My father's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "Sorry doesn't cover it." My mother's eyes were brimming now, confusion and heartbreak tangled together. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Violet shook her head rapidly. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I felt something cold and sharp rise in me. You didn't mean to? I repeated, and the calm in my voice finally cracked into something edged. Violet, you called him. You texted him. You met him. You lied to me for months. Violet flinched as if I'd slapped her. My mother looked between us, bewildered. Violet, tell me what happened. Violet wiped her face with shaking hands. It started when Ethan had work in Hartford. I was a mess. After everything. And he was kind. He listened. My father's eyes narrowed. And that justifies it? No, Violet whispered. But it happened. My mother shook her head, tears falling now. Oh my God. Violet's shoulders shook. I'm pregnant, she blurted suddenly, like she'd been holding it back and couldn't anymore. I'm 3 months pregnant. The room went dead silent. My mother's face drained of color. Her hand dropped from her mouth. My father didn't blink. He stared at Violet like she had become a stranger wearing his daughter's skin. Ethan shifted in the armchair, looking miserable. My mother's voice came out thin. Pregnant. Violet nodded, sobbing. I didn't plan it. I didn't. My father stood up so abruptly the love seat creaked. Enough. Violet jerked like a startled animal. My father pointed at Ethan, his finger rigid. You, get out. Ethan blinked. Mr. Harper, please. Out, my father repeated, voice rising. Before I forget who I am. Ethan looked at me, desperate. Charlotte. I didn't move. I didn't save him. I didn't speak. Ethan swallowed hard and stood. He hesitated, eyes flicking to Violet as if he wanted to leave her behind and also didn't want to be seen abandoning her. He grabbed his suitcase from near the door. My father didn't take his eyes off him. If you ever come near my daughter again, I will make sure you regret it. Ethan flinched. I'm sorry. My father's laugh was harsh. You're not sorry. You're caught. Ethan left. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt like a guillotine. Then my father turned to Violet. And the look on his face was something I will never forget. It wasn't anger anymore. Anger is hot. This was cold. Violet, he said, voice steady, terrifyingly calm. Get up. Violet stood, trembling. My mother whispered, Frank. My father didn't look at her. No. Violet's tears slid down her face. Dad, please. Please don't. My father lifted a hand, palm out. Do not call me that. Violet's breath hitched. Dad. I said don't, he snapped. Then he took a breath, as if forcing himself into control. You have done something that cannot be undone. Violet shook her head desperately. I know. I'm sorry. I'll fix it. You can't fix it, my father said. You can't fix this by crying. You can't fix this by saying sorry and expecting forgiveness like it's something you're owed. My mother's voice broke. Frank, she's pregnant. My father finally looked at my mother, and I saw grief there too, tucked behind his fury. That, he said quietly, is her problem now. Violet made a choking sound. Dad. I didn't mean. My father cut her off. I do not care what you meant. Violet's knees wobbled. She reached out as if she might grab the couch for support. My father's voice was low. Your sister held you up through every collapse you've had. She gave you money. She gave you time. She gave you love. And you repaid her by climbing into her bed. Violet sobbed harder. I was lonely. My father's eyes flashed. So was she. And she didn't betray you. Violet looked at me then, eyes pleading like I was still her anchor. I stared back, and in my chest something shifted. A door closed. I wasn't her anchor anymore. My father pointed toward the door. Leave. Violet froze. What? Leave, he repeated. You are not staying here. You are not staying with us. You are not going to stand in this house and act like you are part of this family while you destroy it. My mother stood up, trembling. Frank, please. My father's voice softened slightly, but not enough to be kind. Eleanor, if you try to save her from consequences, you will do her no favors. My mother looked at Violet, then at me, then back at Violet. Her face was a battlefield, maternal instinct versus moral clarity. Violet whispered, Mom. My mother pressed a hand to her chest, struggling to breathe. Violet, why? Violet shook her head, tears falling. I don't know. I thought, yes, you do. You just don't want to say it. Because the truth was ugly, Violet wanted something that belonged to me, and she wanted it enough to take it. My father stepped closer to Violet. His voice went quieter, and somehow that made it worse. If you show up at our house, he said, I will not open the door. If you call, I will not answer. You have made a choice. Now you will live with it. Violet's face crumpled. You're disowning me? My father's jaw tightened. You disowned yourself the moment you did this. Violet swayed, then looked at me again. Charlotte, please say something. And I did. I said, get out of my house. The words were steady. Final. Violet made a sobbing sound so broken it almost made my mother collapse. But I didn't move. Violet grabbed her tote bag from the floor with shaking hands. She stumbled toward the door, wiping her face, and for a second it looked like she might throw herself into my mother's arms. My mother took a half step forward, then stopped, as if an invisible line held her back. Violet opened the door and stepped into the rain. The door shut. And, just like that, it was done. My mother's knees buckled. She sat hard on the love seat and covered her face with her hands. My father stood in the middle of the living room breathing hard through his nose. I stood near the fireplace, feeling strangely hollow. A minute passed. 2. Finally, my father turned to me. The fury in his face softened into something else, pain. Oh, Char, he whispered, and his voice cracked on my nickname. That did it. That one sound cracked me open. I sank onto the edge of the couch and pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to hold myself together. But the tears came anyway, hot and unstoppable, pouring down my face like my body had been waiting for permission. My mother moved to me then, arms opening. I let her hold me. I leaned into her like I was suddenly 12 years old again, scraped knees and broken heart. I'm so sorry, she whispered into my hair. I'm so sorry. My father knelt in front of me, large hands gripping my shoulders gently. We're here, he said. You're not alone. And then my father did something I didn't expect. He looked at me, eyes wet, and said, we will handle the rest. The rest. The divorce. The fallout. The long, brutal unraveling. I wiped my face, trembling. I don't know what to do, I admitted. My father's voice was firm. You do exactly what you would tell one of your patients' families to do. One step at a time. You get a lawyer. You protect yourself. My mother nodded, eyes red. We'll help. We'll come stay with you if you want. I swallowed hard. I don't want to be here alone tonight. Then you won't, my mother said immediately. That night, my parents stayed. My father slept on the couch, boots lined neatly by the door like a guard. My mother took the guest room. I lay in my bed with the lamp on, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. Ethan texted me around midnight. Can we talk? Please. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Then I put my phone face down and didn't answer. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I didn't pick some dramatic shark type. I picked a woman recommended by a coworker who'd divorced quietly and efficiently. Her name was Patricia Coe. Patricia's office smelled like citrus cleaner and printer ink. She had silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across a legal pad. When I mentioned Violet, her mouth tightened. Infidelity with a family member complicates the emotional side, she said. Legally, it's still infidelity. I nodded, hands clenched in my lap. Patricia leaned back. Any joint accounts? Yes, I said. Checking savings. Any property besides the house? 2 cars. Retirement accounts. Kids. I shook my head, and for a second I felt a jolt of something I hadn't expected. Relief. Raw, guilty relief. Patricia seemed to understand anyway. She didn't comment. Here's what we do, she said, calm and professional. We file. We secure finances. We document everything. And we keep communication through counsel as much as possible. I nodded, throat tight. Patricia slid a sheet of paper across the desk. Also, she said, tapping it, I want you to start writing down everything you remember. Dates. Conversations. Any proof you have. I thought of my spreadsheet. I almost laughed. I already did, I said. Patricia raised her eyebrows, impressed. Good. That will help. When I left her office, the world looked too bright, too normal. People were walking dogs. Someone was carrying groceries. A couple laughed near the coffee shop. I felt like I'd stepped out of a burning building and everyone else was still sipping tea like nothing had happened. Ethan tried to contact me in every way imaginable. Texts, calls, emails, even a handwritten note he left tucked under the windshield wiper of my car when I was at work. Please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I love you. Let me fix this. Every message had the same shape, a plea that centered his feelings, his regret, his fear. None of them said, I destroyed you. None of them said, I betrayed you with your sister. He wanted to fix it because he wanted the pain to stop for him. The first time I saw Violet after she left my house, it was on my phone screen. She called. Her name lit up the display, and my whole body went cold. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, and I didn't listen. Then she texted. Charlotte, please. Please talk to me. I'm scared. Scared. I stared at the word until it became meaningless. I typed back one sentence. Do not contact me again. She responded immediately. I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you. I'm still your sister. I didn't reply, because the truth was, she wasn't. Not anymore. A week after the confrontation, Ethan showed up at my house. It was a Saturday afternoon. The rain had stopped and the air smelled like wet leaves and cold earth. My parents had gone home, but my father had installed a new deadbolt on my front door before he left. I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. My stomach clenched. My hands went numb. I looked through the peephole. Ethan. He stood on the porch holding a bouquet of flowers like a cliché. He looked exhausted, stubble dark on his jaw, eyes red-rimmed. I didn't open the door. Charlotte, he called through the wood. Please. I just want to talk. I stayed silent. He pressed the doorbell again, longer this time. Charlotte, I know you're in there. I walked to the door and spoke through it, my voice flat. Leave. Please, he said, desperation spilling into his tone. Just 5 minutes. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said. There is, he insisted. You don't understand what happened. Violet, she was vulnerable, I felt something flare hot in my chest. Don't you dare, I said, my voice suddenly sharp. Don't you dare try to make her the reason you cheated. Ethan's voice softened, coaxing. I'm not. I'm just saying it was complicated. It wasn't complicated, I said. It was a choice. Every call, every text, every meeting, every lie. There was a pause, then his voice broke. I was stupid. Yes, I said. He exhaled shakily. Can you please let me in? I miss you. I closed my eyes. The old me would have been moved by that. The old me would have pictured us on the couch, the familiar weight of his arm around my shoulders, the story of us smoothing back into place. But the image wouldn't come anymore. The story had been shredded. I'm filing for divorce, I said. Silence. Then Ethan said, very quietly, you don't have to do this. I laughed once, humorless. I don't have to? Ethan, you already did this. I'm just responding. He sounded angry now, like the plea had flipped into entitlement. So you're just going to throw away 10 years? 10 years. As if he hadn't thrown it away in hotel rooms and Hartford apartments. Yes, I said simply. I am. He slammed his fist against the door once. I jumped slightly, heart racing. Charlotte, he said, voice tight, I'll never forgive myself. That's your problem, I said, and it surprised me how true it felt. He stood there breathing hard. Then his voice dropped low. What about Violet? I froze. What about her? I asked. Ethan hesitated. She's falling apart. A cold laugh bubbled up in me. Are you asking me to comfort her? No, he said quickly. She's pregnant. She's stressed. She says you. She says what? I asked. Ethan swallowed. She says you're being cruel. Cruel. My hands tightened into fists. I stepped closer to the door, voice like ice. Tell Violet that if she ever calls me cruel again, I will send her every piece of evidence I have, and I will make sure everyone she knows understands exactly what she did. Ethan went silent. Leave, I repeated. He whispered, Charlotte. I'm calling the police if you don't leave. I said, and I meant it. Finally, after a long pause, I heard him step back. The porch boards creaked. The bouquet hit the ground with a soft thud. I watched through the peephole as he walked to his car, shoulders hunched, then drove away. When the silence returned, I slid down the door and sat on the floor, shaking. Not because I missed him, because I realized how easily love could turn into something dangerous when it thought it was owed. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Ethan's lawyer tried to negotiate. Ethan wanted time. He wanted space. He wanted counseling first. Patricia didn't flinch. No, she told them in an email. My client is proceeding. In the meantime, I did the practical things. I opened a new bank account in my name and moved my direct deposit. I documented everything. I changed passwords. I made copies of important documents. I placed my grandmother's ring and my mother's handwritten letters in a small lockbox under my bed. Every action felt like building a raft out of splintered wood. At work, I kept showing up. Hospice doesn't pause for personal catastrophe. People still needed their morphine doses, their gentle baths, their hands held at 3 a.m. Families still needed someone to tell them it was okay to rest. Sometimes, sitting beside a dying patient, I felt a twisted kind of gratitude for the clarity death brings. People don't pretend at the end. They don't dress betrayal up in soft words. They don't claim destiny. They tell the truth because there's no time left for lies. And I thought, maybe that's what happened to my marriage. Time ran out. About 6 weeks after the confrontation, my mother called me late at night. Her voice was tight. "Charlotte," she said, "are you sitting down?" My stomach dropped. "What?" "It's Violet," she whispered. I sat on the edge of my bed, heart pounding. "What about her?" My mother exhaled, shaky. "She's in the hospital." I felt my throat tighten. "Why?" My mother's voice cracked. She lost the baby." The words landed heavy. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I was devastated for Violet, though some small, complicated part of me was, but because I felt the universe shift, like a chess piece moving that I hadn't expected. "She miscarried," my mother said, crying softly. "They said it happened suddenly." I stared at the wall, numb. My mother sniffed. "Your father, he doesn't want to go. He says she made her bed." I swallowed hard. "And you?" "I don't know what to do," my mother whispered. "She's still my daughter." There it was, the impossible truth. I closed my eyes. I wanted to be the person who could say, "Don't go. Leave her alone. Let her feel the full weight of what she did." But I also knew what it meant to lose something inside your body. I'd sat with women in hospice who talked about miscarriages from decades ago like they'd happened yesterday. Grief doesn't check your moral record before it enters. "Mom," I said slowly, choosing each word with care, "you can go to the hospital if you need to." My mother sobbed. "But what about you?" I took a breath. "I'm not going." Silence. My mother whispered, "Okay." "I'm not going," I repeated, voice steady. "And I'm not changing my boundary because Violet is in pain. Her pain doesn't erase what she did." My mother's voice broke. "I know." I swallowed hard. "If you go because you're her mother. Not because you think it will fix anything." My mother sniffed. "Okay." "And Mom," I added, my voice quiet but firm, "don't bring her to me. Don't tell her where I am. Don't ask me to talk to her." My mother whispered, "I won't." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. I tried to feel something clean: relief, satisfaction, triumph. But I didn't. What I felt was exhaustion. And a strange, distant sadness. Not for Violet's miscarriage itself, though I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, but for the way she had wanted motherhood so desperately that she'd turned it into a weapon, a justification, a storyline. And now even that storyline had been ripped away. It didn't redeem her. It didn't undo anything. But it did make the whole thing feel even uglier. More pointless. Ethan called the next day. I didn't answer, but he left a voicemail. His voice sounded wrecked. "Charlotte, I heard about Violet. I didn't know. I didn't. God, this is all my fault. Please call me. All my fault." The phrase made me flinch. It wasn't all his fault. It was shared. It was layered. But I could hear something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Fear. Because if Violet wasn't pregnant anymore, then the thing that might have forced a new life narrative was gone. There was no baby to center. No reason to pretend this had meaning. It was just betrayal. And consequences. The divorce finalized in early autumn. The day I signed the final papers, the sky was blue and sharp, the kind of day that feels like the world is trying to pretend everything is fresh. Patricia handed me a pen and said, "You ready?" I stared at the papers for a moment. 10 years reduced to legal language. Assets. Accounts. Property division. Yes, I said. When I signed my name, I felt a strange rush, like stepping off a ledge and realizing you can breathe on the way down. Patricia nodded once. That's it. I walked out of her office into the sunlight and sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel. For a moment, I thought I might cry. Instead, I laughed softly. It wasn't joy. It was disbelief. It was release. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had survived something she didn't think she could survive. Ethan tried one more time after the divorce. He sent me an email, not a pleading one, not an angry one, but a careful one. I hope you're okay. I'm not. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm moving back to Ohio to be near my brother. I'm starting over. I'm sorry I ruined your life. I read it twice. Then I archived it. Not because it didn't matter, but because I refused to keep dragging his words around like a chain. Violet disappeared for a while after the miscarriage. My mother told me small updates when she couldn't help herself. Violet moved apartments. Violet quit her job. Violet was seeing someone, a therapist. My father didn't mention her at all. And I kept my boundary. I didn't ask. I didn't check her social media. I didn't drive past her old building in Hartford like part of me wanted to. I simply let her become a blank space. That was harder than I expected. Because anger is loud and active. Anger gives you something to do. But blank space is quiet. Blank space forces you to sit with what's missing. On a cold November morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about Ethan for an entire day. It hit me like a small miracle. Not because it meant I was over it, but because it meant my mind was reclaiming territory. I started changing my house slowly. Not repainting everything dramatically, not burning furniture, not staging some symbolic purge. Just shifting. I moved the couch to face the window instead of the TV. I replaced the heavy, dark curtains Ethan had chosen with light ones that made the room feel bigger. I bought a new set of dishes, not because the old ones were cursed, but because I wanted something that was mine. I planted bulbs in the backyard even though it was late for it, just because I wanted to believe in spring. Some nights I sat on my porch wrapped in a blanket, listening to the neighborhood settle into silence. And I began to notice things I hadn't noticed before. The sound of my own breathing. The way quiet can feel like safety when it's not filled with lies. The way independence isn't loneliness, it's space. I stopped apologizing for my boundaries. At work, when someone asked if I was okay in that soft way people ask when they've heard rumors, I said, "I'm healing." And I meant it. The first time Violet tried to break the boundary, it was 3 days before Christmas. A card arrived in my mailbox, handwritten, the envelope pale blue. I recognized the loop of the handwriting immediately. My hands went cold. I carried the card inside like it was fragile, dangerous. I set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. A part of me wanted to rip it open, to let the words hit me, to feel the old pull of sisterhood. Another part of me wanted to burn it without reading. Instead, I did what hospice has taught me. I asked myself, what will reading this do to me? Will it help? Will it heal? Or will it reopen a wound that has just started to scar? I didn't open it. I placed it in a drawer, unopened, and shut the drawer. Then I went back outside and finished hanging the simple white lights along the porch rail, my lights, my choice, while the cold air bit my cheeks and the neighborhood smelled like pine and distant fireplaces. I wasn't cruel. I was done. And being done was the first kindness I'd given myself in a long time. The card stayed in the drawer through Christmas. It stayed there through New Year's, too, through the quiet week between holidays when the world feels like it's paused, when people reorganize their closets and swear off sugar and pretend fresh calendars are fresh starts. I didn't open it because I knew Violet. I knew how she wrote when she wanted something. How she could lace guilt into sweetness, how she could pour pain onto a page and make you feel like the villain for not catching it in your hands. And I was tired of catching her. Life without Ethan settled into a strange rhythm. Not easy, not painless, but quieter. I learned new quiet routines, the kind that don't require anyone's approval. I woke up early and made coffee slowly, savoring the silence. I took longer walks after work, even in the cold, letting my lungs burn a little as if the air could scrape some of the betrayal off my skin. I started cooking for one real meals, not just the half-hearted girl dinner I'd lived on in the first month of shock. I didn't call it reinvention. That sounded too glossy, too Instagram. I called it maintenance. Some nights the grief still arrived, uninvited and sharp. It came when I folded towels and remembered Ethan's habit of rolling them too tightly. It came when I heard a song in the grocery store we used to dance to in the kitchen. It came when I saw a couple in their 40s holding hands in line at the pharmacy and my brain, traitorous, whispered, "That used to be you." But even in those moments, I didn't regret the decision. The thing that surprised me most about divorce wasn't the loneliness. It was the clarity. It was realizing how much energy I'd spent, even before the affair, smoothing things, compromising, keeping the peace, making sure everyone felt okay. Without that constant emotional management, I had more space than I knew what to do with. And space is dangerous at first, because space gives your mind room to replay everything. It gives your heart room to ask questions it had been avoiding. Why did Ethan start traveling more? Why did Violet suddenly need me less? Why did I ignore the little weird things? Why wasn't I enough? That last question was the one I had to unlearn. It was the one my body tried to hold on to like it was a truth. But it wasn't truth. It was a wound talking. Because in hospice, you learn something about people. You learn that sometimes the hurt that happens to you has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it's just the shape of other people's emptiness colliding with your trust. In late January, when the air was so cold it made the inside of my nose sting, my father called me in the early evening. His voice was measured, but I could tell something had pushed him. "Charlotte," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm." My chest tightened immediately. "Okay." "It's Violet," he said. My stomach dipped. "What about her?" He exhaled slowly. "She showed up at our house today." I closed my eyes. "Dad." "I didn't let her in," he said quickly, like he knew my first fear. I spoke to her through the door. "What did she want?" I asked. My father's voice hardened. "She wanted your address." A cold rush went through me. "Why?" "She said she needs to talk to you," he said. "She said she's sorry. She said she's different now. She said she's done with Ethan." She said he stopped, and when he spoke again, his tone was sharper. "She said you're punishing her." I felt my jaw clamp. "She's got nerve," I said quietly. "Yes," my father agreed. "She does." I swallowed. "Did you give her anything?" "No," he said, and I could hear the pride buried under the anger. "I told her she made choices, and she doesn't get to demand access to you like you're some door she can knock on until it opens." My eyes burned, sudden tears rising, not sadness this time. Gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered. "She cried," my father said, and his voice softened slightly, almost despite himself. "She said she has nothing left." My throat tightened. "And what did you say?" My father was quiet a moment. "Then, I told her she should have thought about that before she took your life and treated it like a spare room." I let out a shaky breath. Then my father said, "She's coming to Providence." My blood went cold. "What?" "She said she's coming," he repeated. "She doesn't know your exact address, but she knows the general area. She thinks she can find you." My hands started trembling. "Dad, listen to me," he said firmly. "I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you so you're prepared." I swallowed hard. "Okay, lock your doors," he said. "Don't open them for anyone you're not expecting. And if she shows up and won't leave, you call the police." The idea of calling the police on my sister made my stomach twist, but the thought of her showing up uninvited made my skin crawl. "I will," I said. My father's voice softened. "You okay?" I stared at the kitchen window where the dusk was turning the glass into a dark mirror. "No," I admitted. "But I will be." After I hung up, I checked the locks twice. I told myself I was being dramatic. Then I reminded myself, boundaries mean nothing if you don't enforce them. 2 days later, Violet found me anyway. Not at my house. At work. I came out of the hospice facility at the end of my shift with my tote bag slung over my shoulder, my body heavy with the kind of fatigue that comes from being gentle all day. The parking lot was half empty, the winter light already fading. I saw her near my car before my brain registered it fully. A figure in a long coat, hair tucked into a scarf, hands twisting together. For a split second, my body reacted the way it always had. Violet. My sister. My person. Then the memory slammed in like a door, and my entire nervous system went on alert. I stopped walking. Violet turned, and our eyes met across the parking lot. Her face crumpled instantly. Charlotte, she breathed, like she'd been holding her breath for years. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. Violet took a step toward me. Don't, I said, my voice flat. She froze, swallowing hard. Please. Just please. My heart was pounding, but I kept my feet planted. I didn't want her close enough to touch me. Touch felt like trespassing now. How did you find me? I asked. Her eyes flicked away. I remembered the name of the facility from when you told me about it. Months ago. Of course. Of course she'd been listening, filing away details while she was betraying me. Why are you here? I asked. Violet's breath shook. I need to talk to you. No, I said. She flinched. Charlotte. No, I repeated, firmer. I told you not to contact me again. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. But you don't understand what it's been like. I felt a flash of heat in my chest. You don't get to start sentences with "you don't understand," I said. Not after what you did. Violet's hands trembled. I lost everything. I stared at her. She took that as permission and stepped closer. I lost my baby, she whispered, voice cracking. I lost my job. I lost Mom and Dad. I lost myself. My throat tightened, but I didn't soften. I didn't move. Violet's tears spilled over. Ethan left, she said, like it was a confession. He didn't even check on me after the miscarriage. He just disappeared. A bitter, cold laugh almost escaped me. So that was what brought her here. Not remorse. Not love. Abandonment. She'd finally been treated the way she treated others, and now she couldn't stand it. I'm sorry, Violet said, voice desperate. I'm so sorry. I know I can't fix it, but I need you to know I never stopped loving you. I felt my stomach twist. I don't believe that, I said quietly. Violet looked like I'd stabbed her. It's true. If you loved me, I said, each word deliberate, you wouldn't have done it. Violet shook her head, frantic. I wasn't thinking. I was drowning. You were choosing, I cut in. You didn't drown once. You swam to him again and again. Her face collapsed. She looked down at the asphalt as if it might open and swallow her. I need you, she whispered. That sentence, so familiar, so Violet, hit me like a wave. It was the sentence she'd used for years, the one that always triggered my instinct to rescue. But this time, something in me stayed still. No, I said. Her head snapped up. What? I'm not your rescue anymore, I said. Violet's mouth trembled. Charlotte, please. I can't do this alone. I stared at her, and the parking lot seemed to go silent except for the distant hum of traffic. I thought about the version of Violet I used to know, the one who cried on my couch after the adoption fell through, who held my hand at Grandma's funeral, who laughed with her whole body. And then I thought about the Violet who had smiled at me while she was carrying my husband's secret in her pocket. I'm going to say this once, I said, voice calm, almost clinical. You can be sad. You can be broken. You can grieve. But you don't get to make me the person who carries you through it. Violet sobbed, loud and ugly now. But you always. I used to, I said. And you used that. Her face contorted. I didn't use you. I lifted my chin slightly. Then why did you come now? She froze. I watched the realization dawn in her eyes, because she knew the answer, and she knew I knew. She came because she had no one else left to hold her up. She came because the people she betrayed were the people she used as scaffolding. Violet's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't think you would actually leave me. There it was. The ugliest truth. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd assumed I'd forgive her. That my love was automatic and permanent and available no matter what she did. I swallowed hard. Get out of my parking lot, I said. Violet flinched. Charlotte. If you don't, I said, voice steady, I will call security. And if you ever show up at my job again, I will file a report. Her face crumpled, and for a second she looked like she might fall to her knees. Then she whispered, I hate myself. I held her gaze. Then do something about that, I said. But don't do it through me. Violet shook her head, tears pouring. You're so cold. I felt a flash of anger so sharp it surprised me. No, I said. I'm safe. There's a difference. Violet's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me like she was trying to recognize me. Finally, she turned and walked away, shoulders shaking, disappearing into a silver sedan parked near the edge of the lot. I watched her drive off. My legs were trembling so badly I had to grip my car door handle before I could unlock it. When I got inside, I sat behind the wheel and stared at the steering wheel, breathing hard. A part of me wanted to scream. A part of me wanted to chase her, to comfort her, to be the sister I'd been for 3 decades. But another part of me knew, fierce, protective, held that impulse back like a hand on my chest. Because the truth was, if I let Violet back in, she would take until there was nothing left of me. And I had finally decided that I mattered. That night, I went home and opened the drawer. The card was still there, pale blue envelope, waiting like a trap. I stared at it for a long time, then finally picked it up. My fingers slid under the flap. I unfolded the card and read Violet's handwriting. Charlotte, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I'm the last person you want in your life. I know I ruined everything. But I need you to know I'm sorry in a way I've never been sorry in my life. I kept telling myself a story where it would make sense. Where it was fate. Where the universe was giving me what I lost. I was wrong. I was selfish. I was cruel. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I miss you. I miss my sister. I don't know who I am without you, and I know that's not your problem. I had to say it. I'm trying to get help. I love you. V. I read it twice. There were lines in it that sounded almost honest. There were lines in it that sounded like Violet had finally looked at herself without flinching. And still, my body didn't relax. Because even in her apology, Violet centered herself. I don't know who I am without you. It wasn't a confession of love. It was a confession of dependence. I folded the card back up and stared at the envelope. Then I did something I hadn't expected to do. I wrote her one message. Not a conversation. Not a reopening. Just a boundary with clean edges. Violet, do not come to my home or my workplace again. Do not contact me. I hope you get help, but you will do it without me. Charlotte. I sent it. Then I blocked her number. Blocked her email. Blocked her on social media. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Over the next months, my life grew quieter in a way that felt real. I stopped looking over my shoulder every time I walked to my car. I started saying yes to invitations again, coffee with coworkers, dinner with my parents, movie nights with a neighbor I'd always liked but never really known. I joined a small yoga class at a community center and discovered that my body held more grief than my mind did. Some days I'd stretch into a pose and tears would spill out without warning, and the instructor would just bring me a tissue without a single question. I began to sleep through the night again. Not every night, but enough. And in late spring, something happened that felt like a strange kind of closure. I came home one afternoon and found a small package on my porch. No return address. My stomach tightened automatically. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it. The tape was uneven, hastily done. I opened it carefully. Inside was my mother's old locket, the one Violet had borrowed after Mom died and never returned. The tiny gold oval with the worn clasp, the chain thin as a whisper. Under it was a note on plain paper. I'm returning what's yours. I won't contact you again. That was it. No dramatic plea. No long apology. No guilt-laced poetry. Just one final act that almost felt like respect. I held the locket in my palm, thumb brushing the worn metal, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Peace. Because peace isn't always a reunion. Sometimes peace is distance. Sometimes peace is a life rebuilt so carefully, so quietly, that betrayal can't reach it anymore. That summer, I planted new flowers in the backyard. Bright ones. Stubborn ones. And when they bloomed, I sat on my porch with iced tea and watched them sway in the warm air, thinking about how healing doesn't look like a movie. Healing looks like dishes. Laundry. Locked doors. Blocked numbers. New curtains. Healing looks like a woman choosing herself again and again until it becomes natural. And sometimes, healing looks like quiet. The kind of quiet no one can steal. The locket sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see. Inside was just a tiny photo of my mother and father from before my mother got sick, the kind of picture you could find in an old album, but because touching it felt like touching time. When I finally clicked it open, the hinge made the smallest sound, like a sigh. The photo was faded at the edges. My mother's smile was wide, carefree. My father's arm was around her waist, pulling her close. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Then I shut it gently and put it on, letting the chain rest against my collarbone like a weight and a comfort at the same time. I thought, I survived my mother's death. I survived my sister's collapse. I survived my husband's betrayal. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't a victory lap. But it was fact. And facts are grounding. That evening, my father came by to fix a loose railing on the back steps. He had always been the type of man who expressed love through doing. If he couldn't fix a problem directly, he would fix the nearest physical object as if it gave him leverage over the world. I made iced tea and sat on the porch while he tightened bolts and muttered under his breath about cheap hardware. When he finished, he wiped his hands on a rag and sat on the bottom step, looking out at my small backyard where the new flowers were just starting to lean into bloom. "You get that package?" he asked casually, as if he was asking about the weather. "Yes," I said. He nodded once. "Good." We sat in silence a moment. Then he said, voice low, "She called your mother." My stomach tightened. "When?" "Last week," he said. "She didn't call me. She knows better." I swallowed. "What did Mom say?" My father exhaled hard through his nose. "Your mother told her she loves her. Because she does. And then she told her she can't come back the way she left." My throat tightened. "And Violet?" My father's jaw clenched. "She cried. Said she's trying. Said she's in therapy. Said she's in some group. Your mother asked her if she'd stopped drinking." I blinked. "Drinking?" My father's eyes stayed on the yard. "She's been drinking more than she should. Apparently since, everything." The information landed in me like a stone. I hadn't known that. Or maybe I had, in the back of my mind, where you keep the ugly possibilities you don't want to name. My father continued, voice tight. "Your mother told her she needs to focus on getting well, not on forcing forgiveness." I nodded slowly. My father glanced at me then, careful. "Your mother wanted me to tell you so you wouldn't be blindsided if Violet pops back up." "I blocked her," I said. "I know," he said. "Good." I stared at my hands. "Does Mom want me to?" "No," my father said immediately. "Your mother wants you safe. She misses the idea of Violet. But she's not stupid, Char." My eyes stung. My father's voice softened. "She asked if you're okay." I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "I'm better." My father nodded like that mattered. Like, better was something he could measure and hold. Then, after a pause, he said, "Ethan called me too." My whole body stiffened. "What?" I said sharply. My father's eyes hardened. 3 days ago. He left a voicemail. I didn't call back. My heart pounded. "What did he say?" My father stared out at the yard, jaw clenched. "He said he's sorry. He said he's moving. He said he wanted to make amends." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Make amends. My father's mouth twisted. "He asked if I'd tell you he's changed." I swallowed hard. He actually said that? Yes, my father said. As if you're supposed to reward him for finally becoming a decent person after he set your life on fire. My hands trembled. I folded them together tightly. My father's voice dropped, protective. He also said Violet tried to contact him. That surprised me. She did? I asked. My father nodded once. He said she reached out after the miscarriage. Said she wanted to talk. He didn't respond. So Violet had been abandoned by the person she'd burned her life for. The most predictable part of the whole story. I stared at the yard, at the flowers, at the soft movement of leaves in the evening breeze. What did you do? I asked. My father's answer was immediate. I deleted the voicemail. Relief washed through me so strongly I almost cried. My father looked at me then, eyes sharp. You don't owe either of them your attention. You hear me? I nodded. He leaned forward slightly, voice firm. You do not let them crawl back in through pity. Not Violet. Not Ethan. Pity is how they get you. They've always known you have a soft spot. The words hit harder than he meant them to, because they were true. My softness had been weaponized. I swallowed. I won't. My father nodded, satisfied. That night, after he left, I sat in my living room with the windows open. The air smelled like cut grass and warmth. The neighborhood was quiet except for someone grilling somewhere down the street. I turned off the lights and let the dusk fill the room. And then, for the first time in months, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do. I pulled out an old photo album. Not the digital kind. The real one with plastic sleeves and yellowing corners. I flipped through pictures of my life like I was meeting myself again. There was me at 10, tooth missing, holding Violet's hand at the beach. Violet at 16 in a bright prom dress, mascara streaked because she'd cried over some boy, and me standing behind her, arms around her shoulders. A photo of Ethan and me on our wedding day, his arm around my waist, my face glowing with trust. I stared at that one longer than I expected to. Not because I missed him. Because I missed her, the woman in the photo. The version of me who believed love was safe. I traced the edge of the picture with my finger and whispered, I'm sorry. Not to Ethan. To myself. For ignoring the little alarms. For overgiving. For making myself smaller to keep other people comfortable. For thinking being the strong one meant I had to tolerate anything. I closed the album and sat quietly with the weight of it. Then I did something else. I opened a new document on my laptop and started writing. Not a letter to Violet. Not a letter to Ethan. A letter to me. I wrote down everything I would not do again. I will not confuse empathy with obligation. I will not accept apologies that demand access. I will not let someone's crisis become my job. I will not trade my peace for anyone's comfort. I stared at the list when I was done, feeling something settle in me like a foundation being poured. A week later, I got a promotion at work. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks. But it mattered. My supervisor called me into her office and said, You've been carrying some of our toughest families with so much steadiness. We want you to step into a lead nurse role. I blinked, surprised. Me? She smiled. Yes. You. I said yes without asking anyone's opinion. That was new. The first time I drove to Hartford again, it was accidental. A patient transfer required me to attend a training at a facility just outside the city. I didn't realize until I was already on the highway and saw the exit sign, Hartford, 3 miles. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My heart did an old, sharp jump. For a moment my body reacted as if I was stepping back into the betrayal. Then I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this city does not own my trauma. I drove past the skyline without looking at it too long. I went to my training. I did my job. I ate lunch in a small cafe where nobody knew me. And when I drove home, I realized something quietly monumental. Hartford had become just a place again. Not a symbol. Not a wound. A place. That's how healing happens sometimes. Not in grand moments. In stolen normal. Late summer came in thick and warm. My backyard flowers bloomed bright and stubborn. I hosted my parents for dinner and we ate outside. My father grilled. My mother brought a lemon cake and laughed at my terrible attempt at gardening. I almost believed, for a few hours, that my family had simply reshaped itself. Then, in September, my mother called me on a Sunday morning. Her voice was careful. "Charlotte, honey, are you busy?" I knew then. The careful voice meant something was coming. "No," I said. "What is it?" A pause. Then, "Violet is asking about you." My stomach tightened, but not with panic this time. With irritation. With something like weary expectation. "What exactly is she asking?" I said. My mother exhaled softly. "She wants to meet. She says she's been sober for 4 months. She says she's doing the work. She says she doesn't want forgiveness. She just wants to look you in the eye and apologize." I closed my eyes. The old me would have heard sober and doing the work and felt compelled to reward it. But sobriety is not a bargaining chip. Therapy is not a coupon. Personal growth does not purchase access to the people you harmed. "Mom," I said slowly, "do you believe her?" My mother hesitated. I believe she's trying." "That's not what I asked," I said gently. My mother went quiet. Then she whispered, "I don't know." I swallowed hard. "Okay." My mother's voice trembled. "She's still my child." "I know," I said. "And you can love her. You can support her. You can visit her. But you cannot use me as the bridge." My mother sniffed. "I wouldn't." I softened my voice. "I'm not ready, Mom." My mother sighed, a mix of sorrow and understanding. "Okay." Then she asked, small, "Do you think you'll ever be?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought about Violet in the parking lot. Violet crying. Violet calling me cold. Violet assuming my love was permanent. I thought about the way my body had reacted to her presence. The way my skin crawled. And I realized the answer was complicated. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But if I ever do, it will be because I choose it. Not because she needs it." My mother whispered, "That's fair." When we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the locket on my chest. I tried to imagine meeting Violet. In my mind, she sat across from me in some neutral place, a coffee shop maybe, hands wrapped around a mug. She apologized. She cried. She told me she was sick, broken, desperate. And then what? Then she would want something. Even if she said she didn't. She would want relief. She would want absolution. She would want her old anchor back. And I didn't have that role in me anymore. The next day, I wrote my mother a message to forward to Violet. Short. Clean. "I'm glad you're getting help. I hope you keep going. I'm not meeting. Please respect my boundary." My mother replied with a single heart emoji and "I understand." That was the closest thing to peace my family could offer at that moment. A month later, a strange thing happened. I was at the grocery store, standing in the produce aisle, comparing 2 bunches of cilantro like it was the most important decision of my life, when someone behind me said, "Charlotte." I turned. It wasn't Violet. It was Ethan's sister, Anna. My stomach dropped anyway. Anna stood there holding a basket of apples, eyes wide. She looked shocked, then awkward, then apologetic all in one breath. "Hi," she said carefully. "I didn't expect to see you." My pulse thundered. "Hi." Anna swallowed. "Are you okay?" The question was loaded. I could hear all the unspoken things behind it. "Are you still wrecked? Are you still angry? Did Ethan ruin you completely?" I lifted my chin. "I'm okay." Anna nodded quickly, relief crossing her face. Good. There was a beat of silence. Then she blurted, "He's not doing well." I stared at her. I hadn't asked. I didn't want to know. But she'd said it anyway, like she'd been waiting to offload it. "Anna," I said evenly, "I'm not the person you tell that to." She flushed. "I know. I'm sorry. He talks about you like you're the one who got away." A sharp, bitter laugh rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. "The one who got away?" I repeated softly. "I didn't get away. He pushed me off a cliff." Anna winced. "You're right." I held her gaze. "Why are you telling me this?" Anna's eyes flicked down to her basket. "Because he keeps saying he wants to apologize. He keeps asking if I think you'll ever speak to him again." I felt something cold and steady settle into place. "No," I said simply. Anna looked up, startled. "I mean it," I said. "No. He can live with it." Anna's mouth trembled slightly. He says Violet ruined everything. I felt a spark of anger flare. No, I said sharply. He did. Violet participated. But Ethan made his own choices. Anna nodded quickly. I know. She hesitated, then said, quieter, he also told me Violet reached out to him again recently. My skin prickled. What? I asked before I could stop myself. Anna nodded, uncomfortable. A few weeks ago. She emailed him. He didn't respond. He showed me because he wanted me to, I don't know, validate him, I guess. Of course Violet still tried to circle back to the wreckage. I exhaled slowly. Okay. Anna looked at me with something like respect and sadness. You look different. I raised an eyebrow. Different how? Anna searched for words. Stronger. But not hard. Just steady. I felt something loosen in my chest. Thank you, I said, surprising myself. Anna nodded, then backed away slightly. I'm sorry for what he did to you. I held her gaze. I am too. And then, because I'd learned to end conversations before they became traps, I said, take care, Anna. She nodded, and we walked away from each other in opposite directions, the produce aisle swallowing the encounter like it had never happened. In the car afterward, my hands shook for a few minutes. Old adrenaline. Old fear. But then it passed. And I realized something else. Hearing that Ethan was miserable didn't satisfy me. It didn't heal me. It didn't give me closure. Because closure was never going to come from his suffering. Closure was coming from my life continuing without him. From my days being mine again. From my heart learning, slowly, that safety is not something you beg for. It's something you build. That night I sat on my porch again, the air crisp now, autumn creeping in. The leaves had started to turn, small streaks of amber and red, like the world was practicing letting go. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and watched the trees move in the breeze. And I thought, very quietly, my life didn't end when they betrayed me. It just changed shape. October arrived with sharp mornings and warm afternoons, the kind of weather that tricks you into thinking summer is still nearby. I started leaving my windows cracked at night again, letting the cool air roll through the house. It felt like permission. Like I no longer needed to seal myself in. Work was steady, heavy in the usual way. Some days I drove home with the smell of antiseptic still clinging to my clothes and the echoes of family's grief still clinging to my mind. But the lead nurse role gave me something unexpected, purpose that wasn't tied to anyone else's crisis. I wasn't just holding people up. I was building something. One Wednesday, after a particularly brutal day, 2 deaths, one angry son, and a patient who had begged me not to leave her alone, I came home and found my porch light on. I knew I'd turned it off before I left. I always turned it off, because I'm the kind of person who checks the stove twice even when I haven't cooked. My stomach tightened. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a moment, keys still in my hand, heart thumping. The light spilled across the steps like a spotlight. Then I saw the shadow. Someone sitting on the top step, shoulders hunched, head down. My body went cold. Not fear exactly, more like a deep, involuntary dread. I knew before I even opened my car door. Violet. She stood when she saw my headlights, her face pale in the porch glow. She wore a long cardigan and jeans, hair pulled into a messy knot. She looked thinner than I remembered, cheekbones sharper, eyes hollowed out. Charlotte, she said, voice trembling. I didn't get out of the car. I rolled the window down halfway, just enough to speak. What are you doing here? I asked, and my voice came out flat, too tired for drama. Violet flinched like I'd slapped her. I needed to see you, she whispered. I stared at her through the glass. You're trespassing, I said. Her mouth trembled. Please. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Go home, I said. She shook her head desperately. No. Please. I can't keep living like this. My jaw tightened. Then call your therapist. Violet's eyes filled with tears. I did. She told me to write you letters. To take accountability. I didn't move. And I told you not to contact me. She stepped closer to the car, hands raised slightly like she was approaching a frightened animal. I know, she whispered. I know. I've been sober. I've been doing meetings. I've been trying to be a person again. I felt nothing soften. Not because I wanted her to fail. Because her improvement didn't erase her violation. Good, I said. Keep doing that. Away from me. Violet's face crumpled. Charlotte, please, just let me apologize. To your face. Just once. I stared at her, exhaustion buzzing in my bones. You've apologized, I said. In the card. In texts. In your head, probably 1,000 times. Not like this, she insisted. Not real. I need you to hear me. There it was. Need. I clenched my hands around the steering wheel. No, I said quietly. Violet's sob burst out loud, raw and sudden. Why are you so? Don't, I warned, my voice sharpening. She swallowed hard, tears streaming. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I watched her in the porch light, watched the way her hands trembled, watched her body fold inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. For a moment, a flash of the old Violet flickered, the sister who used to crawl into my bed when we were kids after nightmares. The one who used to whisper, "Can I stay with you?" My chest tightened. Then the other Violet surged forward, the one who had smiled at me while sleeping with my husband. I stayed cold. Leave, I said. Violet shook her head. I can't until you say you don't hate me. The sentence hit me like a punch. Because it was an emotional hostage situation. A demand disguised as a plea. I felt something rise in me, not rage, not grief, authority. I'm going to say this clearly, I said. You do not get to control my feelings. Violet blinked, stunned. I don't exist to relieve your guilt, I continued. You did something unforgivable to me. And you keep trying to force forgiveness like it's a rehab milestone. Violet's mouth opened, then closed again. I kept my voice steady. I don't hate you. Hate takes energy I'm not giving you anymore. Her face crumpled. Then what do you feel? I stared at her for a long moment, then answered honestly. I feel done, I said. She made a broken sound, like that word cut deeper than any insult. I'm done being your anchor, I added. Done being your safety net. Done being the person you assume will always come back. Violet's voice came out strangled. But you're my sister. I nodded once. Yes. And you were mine. The silence that followed was heavy. Violet took a shaky breath. I know I destroyed everything, she whispered. I know. But I don't know how to live with it. I watched her, and something in me softened just enough to be human, just enough to be clear, not cruel. You learn, I said. You live with it the same way people live with the consequences of any choice. You face it. You don't run to the person you hurt and ask them to carry it for you. Violet's shoulders shook. I don't deserve to exist. My stomach tightened, alarm bells flashing. Not because I wanted to rescue her, but because that kind of statement is dangerous. Violet, I said sharply, if you're thinking about hurting yourself, you need to call someone now. Your therapist. A hotline. Mom. But not me. Her eyes widened. I'm not going to do that. I just feel like it. I'm not your emergency contact, I said firmly. She stared at me, stunned, like she couldn't believe I'd say it. Then she whispered, you really changed. I nodded. Yes. For a long moment, Violet just stood there, tears dripping off her chin. Finally, she took a step back. I brought something, she said quietly, and she reached into her cardigan pocket. My body tensed. She pulled out a small, folded piece of paper and held it up like an offering. It's my new number, she whispered. Just in case. If you ever want to. No, I said immediately. Her hand froze midair. I'm not taking that, I said. Violet's eyes squeezed shut. She nodded slowly, as if absorbing a final blow. Then she dropped the paper onto my driveway like it was too heavy to hold. I'll go, she whispered. I watched her walk down my steps, shoulders hunched, moving like someone underwater. She climbed into her car parked across the street. Of course, she'd parked across the street, as if distance made this less invasive, and sat there for a long moment before starting the engine. Her headlights swept across my lawn, across the flowers, across the porch where she'd once sat laughing with me. Then she drove away. I sat in my car, hands shaking, and I realized my throat hurt from holding tension. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting like I taught families to count when panic hit. When I finally went inside, I locked the door, then leaned my forehead against the wood. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, voice warm and sleepy. "Honey." "Violet came to my house," I said. Silence. Then my mother's voice tightened. "What?" "She was on my porch when I got home," I repeated. She cornered me. Again. I heard my mother inhale sharply. "Oh my God." "I didn't let her in," I said, voice shaking slightly now that the moment was over. "I told her to leave." "She did." My mother's voice broke. "I'm so sorry." I swallowed hard. "Mom, this has to stop." "I know," my mother whispered. "No," I said, firm. "Not, I know. You have to tell her. You have to tell her that if she shows up at my house again, you will not defend her." My mother sobbed softly. "I would never defend that." "Then say it to her," I said. "Because she keeps doing it. She keeps believing someone will soften the boundary for her." My mother went quiet, and I could almost hear her thinking, feeling torn between her children. Then she said something that surprised me. "You're right," she whispered. The words were small, but they were solid. "She can't keep doing this," my mother continued, voice trembling with resolve. She's trying to make you responsible for her recovery." "Yes," I said, relief washing through me. My mother sniffed. "I'll call her tomorrow. I'll tell her if she goes near you again, I'm stepping back too." My eyes burned. "Thank you." My mother's voice cracked. "I hate that it's come to this." "I do too," I said softly. "But it has." After we hung up, I slept badly, restless dreams, my body replaying the porch scene in fragments. But the next morning, I woke up with a strange sensation. It wasn't peace yet. It was power. Because for the first time, it felt like the whole family wasn't quietly asking me to absorb the impact. My mother, finally, was choosing a line. That afternoon, my mother called again. She didn't answer, she said, voice tight. I left a voicemail. "What did you say?" I asked. My mother exhaled. "I told her I love her. I told her I'm proud she's sober. And then I told her, if you show up at Charlotte's home or work again, I will not speak to you for a while. I told her she has to respect your boundary." My throat tightened. "That couldn't have been easy," I said. "It wasn't," my mother admitted. "She'll be furious." I felt a flash of grim satisfaction. "Good." My mother gave a sad little laugh. "Charlotte." "I'm sorry," I said quickly, softer. I'm tired." "I know," my mother whispered. That weekend, I did something I'd been avoiding. I installed a camera doorbell. I told myself it was for safety, not because I was afraid. But it was both. When the package arrived, I sat on my porch with a screwdriver and followed the instructions, hands steady. The act of tightening screws felt strangely soothing. Control. After I finished, I tested it. The camera captured my face clearly. My own eyes stared back at me on the screen. For a second, it felt like I was watching a stranger. Then I recognized her. Not the betrayed wife. Not the older sister. Not the anchor. Just me. A woman with tired eyes and a stubborn jaw. A woman who had learned, painfully, how to choose herself. A few weeks later, something gentle happened. I was walking my trash bins back up the driveway when my neighbor, Daniel, called out from across the street. "Hey, Charlotte, need a hand with those?" I looked up. Daniel had moved in last year, a quiet guy in his early 40s who worked as a high school guidance counselor. We'd exchanged polite hellos, nothing more. "I'm fine," I called back, but my bin hit a crack in the pavement and tipped slightly. Daniel jogged over and steadied it with one hand, smiling. "Those wheels always fight," he said. Apparently, I muttered, embarrassed. He glanced at my porch light. "You get that new doorbell camera?" "Yes," I said. Daniel nodded, no judgment. "Smart. Weird times." I hesitated, then said, "Yeah." He looked at me for a second longer than normal, as if he was deciding whether to say something. Then he said, gently, "If you ever need someone to walk you to your car at night, or just keep an eye out, I'm around." My throat tightened unexpectedly. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't pity. It was simple human care. "Thank you," I said quietly. Daniel nodded once, then stepped back. "No problem." He started to walk away, then paused and turned. Also, I'm making chili Sunday. Big pot. If you want to come over for a bowl, you're welcome. I blinked, surprised. It would have been so easy to say no. To keep my life sealed and quiet and safe. But something in me, something newly brave, wanted to let kindness in. I'd like that, I heard myself say. Daniel smiled. Cool. 6-ish. 6, I confirmed. That Sunday, I walked across the street with a loaf of bread in my hands, feeling oddly nervous. Daniel's house smelled like cumin and tomatoes and something warm. He had music playing softly old soul, the kind my mother liked. His living room was neat but lived in, books stacked on the coffee table. There were 2 other neighbors there, an older couple, friendly and easy. We ate chili in mismatched bowls and talked about nothing important, weather, movies, the way the town still hadn't fixed the potholes. And I realized, halfway through my second bowl, that I was laughing. Not a polite laugh. A real one. The sound surprised me so much I almost stopped. But then I let it continue. Because laughter is a kind of proof. Proof that the body can make light again after it's been bruised. When I went home that night, the air was crisp. The stars were sharp. My porch light glowed. I stood on my steps and looked out at the quiet street. And I felt something settle in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope I'd had before, the kind that assumed people would protect you because you love them. A wiser hope. The kind that says, I can build a life where I'm safe. I can let good people in. I can grow around what broke me. Inside, I touched the locket at my collarbone. And for the first time since the day that notification chimed, I whispered into the quiet house. I'm going to be okay. The next morning, I woke up with the faint echo of laughter still in my chest. It's strange how your body can remember joy the way it remembers pain. Pain leaves bruises in the mind, but joy leaves fingerprints too small, warm reminders that you're still capable of being alive instead of merely surviving. I made coffee and drank it at the kitchen table with the window open. Outside, a few leaves blew across the driveway like little orange birds. The air smelled clean and sharp. My phone buzzed once. A text from my mother. She replied to my voicemail. She's angry. She says I'm taking Charlotte's side. I told her there are no sides, there are consequences. She hung up. My throat tightened, and I stared at the message for a long moment. There are no sides, there are consequences. My mother had finally said out loud what I'd been carrying alone for so long. I texted back, thank you. I love you. She responded immediately, I love you too. I'm proud of you. I read that twice, letting it sink in. Then I stood up and did something practical because that was my coping mechanism. I started cleaning. Not frantic cleaning. Not scrubbing my feelings into the floor. Just tending to my house the way you tend to a life. Wiping counters. Folding blankets. Opening the windows to let stale air out. I was shaking out a throw pillow when the doorbell camera alert popped up. Motion detected. My stomach dropped instinctively. My hands went cold. I grabbed my phone and opened the live feed. A figure stood on my porch. Not Violet. A man in a navy jacket, holding a small clipboard and wearing the neutral expression of someone who doesn't expect to be part of anyone's drama. Delivery. I exhaled a shaky breath and laughed softly at myself. See? I thought. You're still wired to brace for impact. But impact isn't always coming anymore. I waited until he left, then stepped outside to collect the package. It was from my father. He'd mailed me a new set of locks, just in case, along with a note in his blocky handwriting. You can never be too careful. Love, Dad. I carried the box inside and set it by the door. Then I noticed something on the driveway. A small folded piece of paper near the edge, fluttering slightly in the breeze. My chest tightened. I walked closer and saw it. Violet's paper. The one she dropped when she came last time. Her number. It had gotten damp from dew, edges curled, but it was still readable. I stared at it a long moment. For a second, I pictured picking it up, saving it, just in case. Just in case she truly changed. Just in case someday I needed closure. Just in case my heart softened again. Then I realized something. Keeping it would be a tiny crack in the boundary. A little maybe she could someday wedge her way into. I bent down, picked up the paper, and walked to the trash can. I dropped it in. Then I took a deep breath, closed the lid, and felt an odd sense of finality. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Final. Days passed. Then weeks. Violet didn't show up again. The doorbell camera stayed quiet except for deliveries, the occasional neighbor's cat, and one memorable raccoon that stared into the lens like it had opinions about my porch decor. My mother kept her word. She didn't pressure me. She didn't bring Violet up unless it was necessary. And slowly, my body stopped scanning every moment for danger. Daniel's chilly night turned into something small and sweet. Not a romance. Not a whirlwind. Just community. Sometimes he'd wave from his porch when I got home. Sometimes I'd bring him leftover cookies from a baking experiment. He'd text once in a while, "Want to join a few of us for trivia?" No pressure. And for the first time in a long time, no pressure felt real. One Friday night, I went. The trivia night was in a small pub with warm lights and scuffed wooden tables. Our team ended up being a weird little patchwork: Daniel, the older couple from across the street, and me. I didn't know much about sports, but I knew obscure medical facts, and it turned out that's surprisingly helpful when the trivia host asks, "What is the largest organ in the human body?" "Skin," I said immediately. Daniel grinned. "She's a ringer." We didn't win, but we didn't care. We laughed, we ate fried pickles, and when I walked home afterward, the night air cool on my cheeks, I realized I hadn't thought about Violet once. That was the real victory. Not revenge. Not their misery. My freedom. Then, in early December, something happened that tested all of it. I came home from work to find a car parked across the street. A silver sedan. My heart lurched. Violet's car. For a split second, all the old adrenaline surged, my hands went cold, my breathing shallow, my mind snapping into panic mode. I forced myself to inhale slowly. I checked the doorbell camera feed. No one on the porch. I stayed in my car and watched. After a minute, the sedan door opened. Violet stepped out. She looked different. Thinner, yes, but also steadier. Hair pulled back neatly. No frantic hovering. No trembling hands. She stood on the sidewalk with her arms folded, staring at my house. Not moving. Not approaching. Just waiting. My pulse hammered. I thought about calling the police. I thought about driving away. I thought about rolling down the window and screaming. Instead, I sat still and watched. Because part of healing is trusting your own choices. After a long moment, Violet turned her head slightly, as if she sensed my presence, and our eyes met through the windshield. She didn't rush toward me. She didn't cry. She didn't wave. She just looked at me. And then, slowly, she lifted one hand, palm out, not a beckoning gesture, not a demand. A stop sign. A silent promise. I'm not coming closer. My heart thudded painfully. I sat frozen, staring at her. Then Violet did something I didn't expect. She put her hand down, turned around, walked back to her car, and got in. She sat there for maybe 10 seconds, then started the engine and drove away. Just like that. No confrontation. No scene. I sat in my car shaking, tears suddenly spilling down my face, not grief exactly, not relief exactly, something complicated and raw. Because that was the first respectful thing Violet had done in a long time. She had come close enough to be seen, but not close enough to invade. It didn't fix anything. It didn't reopen my heart. But it did something small and strangely important. It confirmed that my boundary had finally reached her. That night, I called my mother. She came, I said. My mother's voice went tight. Oh God, did she? She didn't come up to the house, I said quickly. She just stood on the sidewalk, looked at me, then left. My mother was quiet a moment. Then she whispered, she told me she might. My stomach clenched. She did. My mother sighed. She said she wanted to see you. Not talk. Not force anything. Just see you. She said she needed to remind herself you're real. That what she did was real. I closed my eyes. My mother's voice trembled. I told her if she went near you, I'd step back. She promised she wouldn't. She said she just wanted to pay respect to your life. That's the word she used. Pay respect. I swallowed hard. I'm not ready, I said, even though she hadn't asked. I know, my mother whispered. And she knows too, I think. I sat on the edge of my bed, locket cool against my skin. I don't know how I feel, I admitted. My mother's voice was gentle. You don't have to know. After we hung up, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My brain tried to shape it into a story. Violet changed. Violet respected your boundary. Violet is redeemable. But real life doesn't move in clean arcs. Redemption isn't a magic eraser. What Violet had done was still carved into my memory. But her leaving without pushing, it planted a new fact beside the old ones. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just evidence. Evidence that she might finally understand consequences. In hospice, I'd learned that people can change in the last days of their lives, not always, but sometimes. They can admit things they never admitted. They can soften. They can become honest. And sometimes, even when it doesn't fix the past, it matters. I fell asleep eventually with one thought repeating, steady as a heartbeat. Boundaries work. They don't make pain disappear. They make safety possible. And safety is where healing grows. Winter settled in slowly, like a heavy blanket pulled over the neighborhood. The mornings went dark later. The evenings went dark sooner. The sky stayed the color of dull metal for days at a time, and the air smelled like snow even when it didn't fall. After Violet's silent sidewalk visit, I expected my nervous system to stay jumpy for weeks. But it didn't. Something about her leaving without forcing a moment had actually calmed my body down. It told my instincts, in the only language instincts understand, that the danger had changed shape. That I wasn't being hunted. That I still had control. Control mattered more than closure. And slowly, I stopped holding my breath. December brought its own kind of softness. Not the kind you see in movies, no glittering transformation montage, but the quiet softness of routines that don't hurt anymore. My mother and father came over the weekend before Christmas. We made soup. We watched a dumb holiday movie and laughed at the terrible acting. My father fell asleep halfway through, mouth slightly open, snoring gently, and my mother took a picture to tease him later. At one point, she looked at me, eyes shining in the tree lights, and whispered, "You seem lighter." I didn't want to tempt fate by agreeing. But I felt it too. Not light like nothing happened. Light like I wasn't dragging the betrayal behind me every second of the day. After they left, I stood at the window and watched their headlights fade down the street. Then I noticed a small, familiar movement across the road. Daniel was outside shoveling a thin layer of snow off his front walkway. He glanced up, saw me in the window, and lifted his shovel in greeting like it was a wave. I smiled before I could stop myself. A real smile. I grabbed my coat, slipped on boots, and stepped outside. "You need help?" I called across the street. Daniel laughed. "It's like 4 flakes. But I'll take the company." I walked over, hands shoved into my pockets. We talked while he shoveled, about nothing important. About how the town always waited too long to salt the roads. About how people suddenly drove like lunatics the moment a snowflake landed. About how he'd accidentally bought a Christmas tree that was too tall and had to trim the top off like a bad haircut. I found myself laughing again. Then Daniel paused, resting his hands on the shovel handle. He looked at me carefully, like he didn't want to step into something too private. "You doing okay?" he asked. I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because answering honestly felt strangely intimate. "Yes," I said slowly. "More than okay. Not all the way, but more." Daniel nodded as if he understood exactly what more meant. "Good," he said simply. No follow-up questions. No curiosity disguised as concern. Just good. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the faint sound of wind against the siding, I realized something else. I hadn't been touched in almost a year. Not in the sexual sense. In the human sense. No one had held my hand. No one had rested a palm against my shoulder. No one had hugged me without it being tinged with grief. When Ethan had cheated, I'd recoiled from touch like it was contaminated. When Violet had betrayed me, I'd recoiled from closeness like it was dangerous. But now, lying in the dark, I felt something stirring that scared me more than anger ever had. Longing. Not for Ethan. Not for Violet. For connection. And I wasn't sure how to let it in without losing myself again. The answer came slowly in small ways. In January, Daniel invited me to a community volunteering day at the local food pantry. It's not sad, he promised with a grin. Well, it is, but it's also weirdly fun. We sort donations and argue about how many cans of beans is too many beans. I rolled my eyes. There is no such thing as too many beans. Daniel laughed. Okay, bean extremist. I went. The pantry was in the basement of a church, warm and noisy with people moving boxes and making jokes. I wore jeans and a sweater and found myself stacking canned goods beside a retired firefighter named Linda who told me, in graphic detail, about her knee replacement. For 3 hours, I was just a person among people. Not a betrayed wife. Not a nurse. Not an anchor. Just Charlotte stacking beans. Afterward, Daniel and I walked out into the cold air with our hands smelling faintly like cardboard and canned tomatoes. Coffee? He asked. I hesitated only a second, then nodded. We went to a small cafe with fogged windows and strong espresso. We sat across from each other, elbows on the table, steam rising from our cups. Daniel asked about my job in a way that wasn't invasive, just curious. I asked about his students. He told me about a kid who'd finally applied to college after months of avoiding it, and his eyes lit up like it mattered deeply to him. It did matter. I watched him talk, and something in my chest warmed, not attraction exactly, though maybe the seed of it, but recognition. Here was someone who cared about people in a steady way. Not performative. Not needy. Steady. When we left, snow had started falling slow, lazy flakes. Daniel offered me his gloves because my hands were cold. I took them, and our fingers brushed briefly. A tiny touch. And my body didn't panic. It just registered it. Warm. Normal. Safe. The first time Violet tried to reach out again, it wasn't directly. It was through my mother. In late February, my mother called and said, "Honey, Violet asked if she could send you something." I felt my stomach tighten, but not with fear. What? I asked. My mother exhaled. She said she wants to send you an email. Not to ask for anything. Just to give you information. Information. That word made my skin prickle. What kind of information? I asked. My mother hesitated. She said it's about Ethan. My stomach dropped. I closed my eyes, anger flaring immediately. What about Ethan? My mother's voice was careful. She said, she found something. Something he did. Something she thinks you should know. For a moment, my mind flashed through possibilities. Money theft. A second affair. Something worse. I forced my voice steady. Did she tell you what it was? No, my mother said quickly. She just said it wasn't about trying to get you back together. She said it was about protecting you. Protecting you. That phrase was like a splinter. Violet didn't get to be my protector now. But the word information nagged at me. As a nurse, I knew the value of facts. I also knew the danger of being blindsided. Okay, I said slowly. Tell her she can send it to you. You read it first. If it's something I need to know, you can forward it. My mother sighed with relief. Okay. And Mom, I added, voice firm, if it's just drama, don't send it. I won't, my mother promised. 2 days later, my mother called again. Her voice was tight. Charlotte, she said, I read it. My heart pounded. What is it? My mother swallowed audibly. It's financial. My stomach clenched. Explain. My mother's voice shook slightly. Violet says Ethan used your joint account to pay off some of her debts. My breath caught. What? I whispered. He transferred money, my mother said. Not just once. Multiple times. While you were still married. Before everything blew up. My hands went numb. How much? I asked. My mother exhaled. She says about 12,000 total. 12,000. My mind did the quick math, vacations, holidays, groceries. It was enough to matter. Enough to hurt. Enough to be yet another hidden betrayal layered under the obvious one. My voice came out thin. Does she have proof? She attached screenshots, my mother said. Bank transfer confirmations. Dates. My throat tightened. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was financial. Ethan hadn't just slept with my sister. He'd used my life, my money, as a resource to fund it. My mother's voice trembled. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry." I swallowed hard. "Send it," I said. My mother hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said, voice steely now. "Send it." When the email arrived, my hands shook as I opened it. Violet's message was short, almost clinical. "Charlotte, I'm not sending this to hurt you. I'm sending it because you deserve to know the full truth. Ethan transferred money from your joint account to my credit cards and medical bills. I lied to myself about it at the time. I told myself it was his money too. I was wrong. It was yours. I'm sorry. I attached screenshots. I'm not asking you to respond. I won't contact you again after this. Violet." I stared at the words. Then I opened the screenshots. Dates. Amounts. Confirmation numbers. My stomach churned. Some of the transfers were during months Ethan had told me we needed to tighten the budget. I remembered conversations. Ethan saying maybe we should delay a weekend trip. Ethan saying we should watch spending. Ethan saying things were tight because of a work restructure. All while he was moving money to my sister. It was like the betrayal kept unfolding, like a disgusting nesting doll. I forwarded the email to Patricia Coe immediately. Then I sat at my kitchen table and let myself feel anger. Not the numb anger. Not the exhausted anger. The clean anger that says, this was wrong. This deserved consequences. A week later, Patricia called me. "Charlotte," she said, brisk. "This is actionable." My heart pounded. "What can we do?" "We can file a motion," she said. "Post-judgment. Recovery of marital funds. Potential fraud depending on how he did it." I swallowed. "Do it." Patricia paused. "You're sure?" "It will reopen contact with him in some form." I thought about Ethan's voicemail to my father. The one who wanted to make amends. I thought about him casting Violet as the villain. I thought about him asking for forgiveness like it was a right. "Yes," I said. Patricia's voice was calm. "Okay, I'll handle it." After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. "Daniel, trivia tonight? Team needs your medical brain." I stared at the screen, tears suddenly spilling, not sadness for Ethan, not grief for Violet. Just overwhelm at how life can contain both ugliness and kindness at the same time. I wiped my face and texted back, "Yes, be there." That night at trivia, when Daniel slid into the seat beside me and handed me a soda with a grin, I felt something steady inside me. The betrayal was still true. The consequences were still unfolding. But so was my life. And for the first time, I realized something with absolute certainty. They didn't get to define the rest of my story. Not Ethan. Not Violet. Not even the version of me they broke. I was writing the next part now. The motion Patricia filed didn't feel like revenge. It felt like accounting. Like pulling a splinter out that had been lodged under the skin for months, festering quietly, invisible until you pressed the right spot and felt that sharp, unmistakable pain. I kept expecting some big emotional payoff when I decided to pursue the money. Some moment where I'd feel triumphant or powerful or satisfied. Instead, what I felt was tired. Tired of finding new rooms inside the betrayal. Tired of realizing that even the parts of my life I thought were stable, shared finances, shared plans, we had been quietly undermined while I was folding laundry and making dinner and believing in us like a person believes in gravity. Patricia sent me a list of things she needed. Copies of statements. Any emails about budgeting. Proof of the transfers if I had access to our joint account history beyond what Violet sent. I printed everything, made a folder, and labeled it in neat block letters because neatness made me feel like I had control. Then I put the folder in a drawer and went to work because work was still where my mind knew how to be steady. At hospice, the seasons show up differently. You notice the way the light changes in patients' rooms, how the shadows stretch longer on the floor in late afternoon. You notice what families bring, hot coffee in October, scented lotions at Christmas, fresh flowers in spring when people start hoping again. One evening, after a long shift, I sat in my car in the staff lot for almost 10 minutes before driving home. I watched my breath fog the windshield. I listened to the engine tick quietly as it cooled. I didn't want to go home because home was where my thoughts got loud. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel again. I stared at the message before opening it, my chest doing that strange fluttery thing it had started doing around him, part comfort, part vulnerability, part fear of misinterpreting kindness. Daniel, I made too much soup. Want some? I can drop it on your porch if you're tired. Drop it on your porch. If you're tired. No pressure. No assumption. Just an offer with an exit ramp built in. I exhaled slowly and typed, I'd love some. Porch is perfect. Thank you. A minute later, anytime. Hope your day wasn't awful. I almost wrote the truth that it had been awful, but in the ordinary way, not the catastrophic way. That I'd held a woman's hand as she slipped away while her daughter whispered apologies into her hair. That I'd watched a husband crumble into sobs when he realized the maybe was gone. Instead, I wrote, long day. Soup will help. Daniel responded with a thumbs up and a little steaming bowl emoji that made me smile despite myself. When I got home, the porch light was on and the soup sat in a paper bag by my door, still warm in a container wrapped in a towel. There was a note on a sticky pad. For the lead nurse who probably forgets to eat. D. My throat tightened. I carried the soup inside and set it on the counter, then stood there for a moment staring at it like it was something fragile. It wasn't the soup. It was the simple fact of someone noticing me in a caring way without needing anything back. I ate standing at the counter, spooning warmth into my mouth, and felt my shoulders slowly unclench. The next few weeks were like that, small moments of steadiness stitched together. Trivia nights. A walk after work when the streetlights came on and the cold air cleared my head. A text from my mother that didn't mention Violet, just a picture of my father asleep in a chair with the caption, "Your dad is pretending he's not obsessed with this new crossword book." Life was quietly insisting on continuing. Then, in early March, Patricia called. Charlotte, she said, brisk in that way she had, like she was always standing in a hallway and needed to keep moving. His attorney responded. My stomach tightened. Okay, they're denying, she said. They're claiming the transfers were consensual household gifts and that because it was a joint account, he had discretion. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Gifts. Patricia's voice stayed calm. I expected that. They want you to get discouraged. I swallowed hard. I'm not. Good, Patricia said. Because I'm not either. She explained the next steps. Documenting your intent matters, she said. If you have any communication from Ethan about budgeting, any messages about money being tight, it helps show deception. If you have any proof you didn't know, that helps too. I thought of a dozen small conversations that had felt normal at the time. Ethan saying maybe we should skip the weekend trip. Ethan saying we should cook at home more. Ethan saying he was worried about his company's restructuring. I'd believed him. I'd adjusted my spending, cut back without complaint. While he was transferring money to my sister. My hands trembled slightly. I have texts, I said. Probably. Pull them, Patricia said. Forward them to me. We'll build a timeline. A timeline. Another spreadsheet. Another set of columns. This was my life now, turning pain into documentation. After the call, I sat on my couch and stared at the blank TV screen for a long time. I didn't miss Ethan. But I missed the version of me who didn't have to think like a lawyer. I missed the simplicity of trusting. My phone buzzed again. My mother. She didn't text often during the day, so my heart jumped. I opened it, bracing. Mom, Violet asked if you got the email. I told her you did, but that you won't respond. She said she understands. She's staying away. I stared at the words. Staying away. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then another message came. Mom, also, I'm proud of you. I should have said it sooner. My eyes stung. I typed, it means a lot. I love you. Her reply came fast, I love you too. That night, I dreamed about the old house we grew up in, the one with the narrow staircase and the creaky third step. In the dream, I was walking up the stairs carrying a heavy basket, and Violet was behind me, laughing, and I turned to look and she wasn't there. Just empty steps. I woke up with my heart racing and my throat tight. It took me a moment to remember where I was. My room. My bed. My locket on the nightstand. The quiet hum of the heater. I sat up and pressed my palm against my chest, breathing slowly. Grief is like that. Even when you've chosen distance, your mind still mourns what you lost, not just the person, but the relationship you thought you had. I showered, got dressed, made coffee. And then, because I was trying to be the kind of person who didn't let fear dictate her day, I opened my laptop and started pulling old text messages. It was tedious, going back months. The casual banter, the on my way, the can you pick up milk? And then the money messages. Ethan, let's chill on spending for a bit. Me, sure. Everything okay? Ethan, yeah. Just want to be safe. Another. Ethan, maybe we skip the weekend trip. I'm stressed about work stuff. Me, okay. We can do something local instead. Another. Ethan, can we pause the furniture shopping? Let's wait until next quarter. Me, sure. Reading them now, they weren't dramatic. They were normal. But they were also manipulation. Tiny nudges to make me comply with a reality he was secretly undermining. I forwarded the screenshots to Patricia and felt another little piece of the old trust die. Later that day, when I went to take out the trash, Daniel was in his driveway fiddling with a bike tire. He looked up when he saw me and lifted a hand. Hey, he said. How's the lead nurse life? I smiled faintly. Busy. He nodded knowingly. Busy I can handle. It's the paperwork that kills me. I laughed softly. It's always paperwork. He glanced at my face a moment longer, then asked gently, you okay? I hesitated, then decided to try something new, a small truth. I'm dealing with some legal stuff, I said. It's annoying. Daniel's expression softened. Do you want to talk about it? I shook my head. Not really. Totally fair, he said immediately, no offense, no push. He turned back to his tire. If you ever need a distraction, I'm around. I nodded. Thanks. I walked back toward my house feeling oddly lighter, just from the fact that I could say no and it would be respected. That week, Patricia scheduled a hearing. Not a courtroom drama, she warned. Likely a short proceeding. But still, a moment where Ethan's choices would be described in public language. The thought made my stomach churn. I didn't want to see him. But I also didn't want to keep letting him do harm without consequence. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the house settle, thinking about all the ways this had reshaped me. How I'd learned to check locks. How I'd learned to block numbers. How I'd learned to keep a calm face while my insides churned. I thought about Violet standing on the sidewalk, choosing not to approach. I thought about Ethan's sister, about the awkward grocery store encounter, and the way she'd tried to feed me information like it might soften something. I thought about Daniel's soup. And I realized my life had become a collection of boundaries and kindnesses, side by side. Boundaries were the walls. Kindness was the warmth inside them. In the morning, I dressed carefully. Not to impress anyone. Just to feel put together. A navy sweater, black slacks, simple earrings. My hair pulled back neatly. Patricia met me outside the courthouse. She was in a gray suit with a folder tucked under her arm, expression all business. You ready? She asked. No, I said honestly. But yes. Patricia nodded. That's usually how it is. Inside, the courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish. The hallways echoed. People spoke in hushed tones. It felt like the building itself demanded restraint. We sat in a small waiting area for a few minutes. Then I saw him. Ethan walked in with his attorney, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he enjoyed being smug. Ethan looked thinner than I remembered, his hair slightly longer, his face drawn. For a split second, my body reacted, an old surge of familiarity. Then it turned into something else. Distance. Ethan's eyes found mine. His face changed, like he was about to step toward me. Patricia stepped slightly in front of me, not aggressively, just shielding. Ethan stopped. He hovered, uncertain, then leaned toward his attorney as if asking permission. His attorney shrugged. Ethan took 2 steps closer, stopping a few feet away, far enough to respect the boundary Patricia's body had created. Charlotte, he said softly. I didn't respond. His mouth tightened. I'm sorry, he whispered. The words were almost rehearsed, like he'd said them in mirrors. I stared at him calmly. "Talk to my lawyer," I said. Ethan flinched. Patricia's voice was clipped. "All communication goes through counsel." Ethan swallowed. His eyes looked glassy. I didn't think it would." Patricia cut him off. "We're not doing this in the hallway." Ethan's shoulders sagged. He looked at me again, and for a moment I saw something like genuine shame. Then his attorney touched his elbow and guided him away. I exhaled slowly, my hands shaking slightly at my sides. Patricia leaned toward me. "You did fine." "I feel like I'm going to throw up," I muttered. Patricia nodded as if that was completely normal. Also normal. The hearing itself was brief. No dramatic speeches. No yelling. Just legal language. Patricia laid out the timeline. The transfers. The amounts. The context, budget conversations, apparent deception. Ethan's attorney argued joint account discretion, framed it as private marital spending. Then, unexpectedly, the judge asked Ethan a question directly. "Mr. Lawson," she said, looking over her glasses, "did your wife know these transfers were occurring?" Ethan hesitated. I felt my stomach drop. A lie here would be easy. A lie here would protect him. Ethan glanced at me, then down at the table. "No," he said quietly. "She didn't." The courtroom went silent for a beat. The judge's expression didn't change much, but something sharpened in her eyes. "Thank you," she said flatly. That was it. No redemption. No apology. Just a fact on the record. The judge didn't decide everything that day. She ordered more documentation, set another date, but she looked unimpressed with Ethan's gifts argument after that admission. Outside the courthouse, Patricia exhaled. "That went well." I stared at the gray sky. "It did." Patricia nodded. He admitted lack of knowledge on record. "That matters." I let out a slow breath. I didn't feel happy, but I felt steadier. As if one more piece of reality had been pinned down where it couldn't be rewritten later. On the drive home, I turned the radio off and drove in silence. When I pulled into my driveway, Daniel was outside, carrying groceries. He looked up, saw me, and lifted a hand. "Hey," he called. "How'd your day go?" I paused, then answered honestly in the simplest way. "I did something hard," I said. Daniel nodded slowly. "And you survived it?" "Yes," I said. He smiled, gentle. "Good." I walked into my house, locked the door, and leaned back against it for a moment. My chest rose and fell with slow breaths. And in that quiet, I realized something that felt almost like a turning point. The people who hurt me were still out there, living their lives. But they were no longer inside mine. Not the way they used to be. Not in my bed. Not in my bank account. Not in my daily choices. They were outside the walls now. And inside the walls. I could breathe. After the courthouse, I didn't crash the way I expected to. I'd braced for the kind of emotional whiplash that usually follows a high-stress moment, the delayed shaking, the sobbing in the shower, the sudden rage while staring at nothing. But instead, what settled over me was an odd, quiet relief. Not because Ethan admitted I didn't know, because he admitted it in a place where words mattered. In hospice, people say things all the time. Promises. Confessions. "I'm sorry. I'll do better." I didn't mean it. But outside a courtroom or a deathbed, words are slippery. They can be rewritten. They can be denied. They can be reshaped into whatever story is most convenient. That day, Ethan's no was pinned to a record. It couldn't be softened later into, well, she sort of knew, or we had an understanding, or it wasn't like that. No, it was clean. It was factual. It was irreversible. And for a woman who had spent months being lied to, irreversibility felt like a strange form of peace. The next week passed in a blur of work and paperwork. Patricia emailed updates, requests, next dates. I forwarded bank statements, screenshots, messages. I watched my life become evidence, and I tried not to feel numb about it. In the evenings, I did what I'd learned to do. I built routine. Tea, dinner, a walk if the weather wasn't awful, a book on the couch with a blanket over my legs, and sometimes trivia. One Thursday night, After we'd lost spectacularly because none of us knew anything about 90s boy bands, Daniel walked me home through the cold. Our town wasn't dangerous, but it was dark in winter, and he did it casually, like it was no big deal. Halfway down the street, he asked, "Do you ever get tired of being strong?" The question landed softly, like he'd placed it on the ground between us instead of throwing it at my chest. I kept walking, hands tucked in my coat pockets. "Yes," I said quietly. Daniel nodded like he'd expected that answer. "I'm not asking you to be strong with me," he said. My throat tightened. We walked a few more steps in silence. The streetlights hummed faintly. Snow crunched under our boots. I swallowed. "I don't know how to be anything else." Daniel glanced at me, expression gentle. "Maybe you don't have to be anything. Maybe you can just be." I felt tears prick behind my eyes, sudden and unwelcome. I laughed softly to cover it. "That sounds suspiciously like therapy talk." Daniel chuckled. "Occupational hazard. Guidance counselor." I shook my head, smiling despite myself. When we reached my driveway, we stopped. The porch light glowed. The doorbell camera blinked its small, watchful eye. Daniel looked at it, then back at me. "I'm glad you have that," he said. "Me too," I admitted. He hesitated, then said, "If your sister, or your ex, ever shows up again and you don't want to handle it alone, text me. Even if it's late." I stared at him for a moment, my chest tight with something that wasn't fear. "Gratitude." "Thank you," I said quietly. Daniel nodded once, like it was settled. "Good night, Charlotte." "Good night." He walked back across the street, and I stood for a second longer on my porch before going inside. Inside, the house felt warm. Safe. Mine. And that was when it happened, the thing I hadn't predicted. A knock at my door. Not the doorbell. A knock. 3 soft taps. My entire body went rigid. I didn't move. The doorbell camera didn't alert because whoever it was standing just out of range, close to the doorframe. The taps came again, slightly firmer. Tap, tap, tap. My heart hammered. I walked quietly toward the door, every step careful. I didn't turn on extra lights. I didn't make noise. I opened the camera feed. The porch was empty, but the audio picked up a faint sound, breathing. Someone was standing too close to the door for the camera angle. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and texted Daniel with shaking fingers. "Someone is at my door. No camera view. Can you come over?" The reply came instantly. "On my way. Don't open." I held my breath, standing in the hallway with my back against the wall, phone in my hand. The knock came again. Then a voice, a soft female. "Charlotte." My blood went cold. "Violet." She was right outside my door. "Charlotte," Violet whispered, and her voice sounded strained, like she'd been crying. "Please. I just need 1 minute." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. I didn't answer. The doorknob didn't rattle. She wasn't trying to force entry. But she was there. She had crossed the line again. "Please," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to be here. I know. But I got scared." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "Leave," I said through the door. Violet sucked in a breath. "Charlotte, please don't." "Leave," I repeated. Louder. There was a pause. Then Violet's voice cracked. "I got served." My stomach clenched. Served. Legal papers. Patricia's motion. Violet's breathing hitched. "They're saying I owe money. They're saying I—" "Leave," I said again, voice cold now. Violet's tone sharpened, desperate. "I tried to help you. I told you. I gave you the screenshots. And you still came to my door," I said. Silence. Then Violet whispered, "I didn't think it would come back on me like this." There it was. The truth, naked. She'd thought she could hand me the information and remain untouched by consequences. She'd thought helping would protect her. I felt anger flare, clean and sharp. "You did it," I said softly. "You took the money. You spent it." Violet sobbed. "I didn't know he was stealing from you." "You knew it wasn't yours," I said. Her voice rose, frantic. "I was drowning. I had bills. I had medical stuff. Then you should have asked me," I said. "You should have asked your sister, the one who always helped you, instead of taking it through my husband's lies." Violet went silent. Then she whispered, "I'm going to lose everything." I closed my eyes. "Not my problem," I said. Violet made a choking sound. "Charlotte, please. I'm begging you. Tell your lawyer to stop." I laughed once, bitter. "Stop? Violet, you didn't stop when you were sleeping with my husband. You didn't stop when you were taking my money. You didn't stop when you came to my workplace. And now you want me to stop consequences?" Violet's breath hitched. "I'm trying to get better." "Then face it," I said. I heard movement, Violet shifting closer to the door, as if she might press her forehead against it. "You're going to ruin me," she whispered. My jaw tightened. "You ruined you," I said. Then, before she could respond, a voice came from the end of my walkway. Firm. Male. Violet. Daniel. I nearly collapsed with relief. Violet froze. I could hear it in the sudden stillness. Daniel's voice came again, closer. "You need to leave." Violet's voice turned sharp, panicked. "This is none of your business." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "It became my business when you started knocking on someone's door after dark," he said. "Go." Violet sounded like she was shaking. I just needed. Daniel cut in, calm and solid. "You're trespassing. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." Silence. Then I heard Violet's breath, ragged. A small sob. And then, footsteps moving away from the door. Quick. Retreating. The porch boards creaked. The gate clicked. I held my breath until I heard a car door slam across the street, then an engine start, then tires on pavement. Only then did I move. I unlocked the door and opened it, stepping onto the porch. Daniel stood near the bottom of my steps, shoulders squared, phone in his hand. "You okay?" he asked immediately. I nodded, throat tight. "Yes, thank you." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding tension too. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was intense." I let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob halfway through. Daniel stepped closer, careful, giving me time to say no. I didn't say no. He wrapped his arms around me, gentle and steady, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself be held without flinching. I cried into his shoulder, not dramatic, just leaking fear, anger, exhaustion. Daniel didn't tell me to calm down. He didn't ask questions. He just stood there, warm and solid, letting me release what my body had been storing. When I finally pulled back, wiping my face, Daniel looked at me seriously. "Do you want me to stay until you feel safe?" he asked. I nodded, voice small. "Yes, just for a little." Daniel nodded. "Okay." We went inside. I locked the door. Then I turned and looked at him, and for the first time, I felt something beyond survival. I felt cared for. Not because someone needed me, because someone chose to show up. And in that quiet, warm living room, with the porch light glowing outside and the door firmly locked, I realized the final truth I hadn't been able to name until then. Healing isn't just cutting people off. Healing is letting the right people in. Daniel stayed for 2 hours. Not in a dramatic way, not patrolling the windows like a guard in a movie. He just sat on my couch, shoes off, hands wrapped around a mug of tea I made on autopilot. The TV was on low, some meaningless show playing in the background, but neither of us watched it. We were listening instead. To the house settling. To the heater clicking on and off. To the normal sounds that only feel normal when you're not afraid. Every few minutes, I glanced at the doorbell camera feed on my phone, half expecting Violet to reappear like a nightmare you can't shake. But the porch stayed empty. Eventually, my breathing slowed. My shoulders dropped. Daniel looked over at me and said quietly, "You don't have to do this alone." The words hit me in a place I hadn't realized was still tender. "I've been alone a lot," I admitted. Daniel nodded. "Yeah." He didn't say, "You're not alone now," in some sweeping way. He didn't promise permanence. He didn't turn it into a declaration. He just said, yeah, like he understood what it cost to carry too much by yourself. After a while, he stood and stretched. "You want me to walk you through checking the locks?" he asked, practical. I laughed softly through my remaining tears. "I already checked them twice." Daniel grinned. "Okay, I respect your thoroughness." He walked to the front door anyway and tested it gently, Not because he didn't trust me, but because doing it together felt like rewriting the moment, turning fear into teamwork. When he came back, he looked at me carefully. "I'm going to head out," he said. "But I'm going to keep my phone on. If anything happens, you text me. Or call." My throat tightened. "Thank you." He nodded. "Good night, Charlotte." "Good night." He paused at the doorway, as if he wanted to say something else, then decided not to. He gave me a small, reassuring smile and left. I locked the door behind him and stood there for a moment, listening to his footsteps fade across the porch. Then I went back to the couch and sat very still. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty. It felt held. The next morning, I called Patricia before I even made coffee. She answered briskly. "Charlotte, Violet came to my house last night," I said. A pause, then Patricia's voice sharpened. "Did she threaten you?" "No," I said. "But she was begging me to stop the motion. She said she got served." Patricia exhaled. "Okay. That tells me she has counsel and they're trying to scare her." "I told her to leave," I said. "She left when my neighbor threatened to call the police." "Good," Patricia said firmly. "And you're going to document it?" "I am," I said. Patricia's tone was all business now. "Write down the time, what she said, what you said, that she was on your porch after dark. If she shows up again, call the police. I'll also send a cease-and-desist letter." My stomach turned. "To my sister?" Patricia didn't soften. "Yes, because boundaries without enforcement are suggestions. And she's already proven she treats suggestions like invitations." I swallowed. "Okay." After the call, I made coffee and drank it standing at the counter, staring out the window at the pale winter morning. My hands were steadier than they'd been the night before, because now there was a plan. And plans are how I survive. Around noon, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. Not because I didn't love her, because I was tired of being the point where everyone's emotions collided. But I answered anyway. "Hi," I said. My mother's voice was tense. "Charlotte, did Violet come to you?" My stomach tightened. "Yes." My mother inhaled sharply. "Oh God." "She came last night," I said. She begged. She tried to guilt me. She crossed the boundary again. My mother's voice cracked. "She didn't tell me she was going to. She said she was staying away." "I know," I said quietly. My mother started crying. "I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. "Mom, I can't keep doing this." "I know," she whispered. "I know. She's going to push until someone stops her," I said. "And it can't be me alone." My mother sobbed softly. "Frank wants to drive up right now and—" "No," I said quickly. "Dad doesn't need to get arrested for punching someone." That made my mother laugh through tears, just a small broken sound. Then I said, "Mom, did Violet mention getting served?" My mother went quiet. Then she whispered, "Yes." My jaw tightened. "And you didn't tell me?" My mother's voice shook with shame. "I didn't think she would show up. She said she was terrified. She said she couldn't sleep. She said she just wanted me to help her breathe. Help her breathe." There it was again, the pull. My mother's instinct to soothe. And my mother's instinct, sometimes, to let Violet's panic become everyone's responsibility. "Mom," I said carefully, "you can comfort her without enabling her." "I know," my mother whispered. "Do you?" I asked, not cruelly, just honestly. My mother cried harder. "I'm trying." I took a breath, softening. "I'm not mad at you. I'm just done being her outlet." My mother sniffed. "I told her after the last time, if she crossed your boundary again, I'd step back." "And now?" I asked. My mother's voice steadied slightly. "Now I have to mean it." I exhaled. My mother continued, voice trembling but firm. "I'm going to call her. I'm going to tell her if she shows up at your house again, I won't answer her calls for a while. Not as punishment. As a boundary." My throat tightened. "Thank you." My mother whispered, "I should have done that years ago." There was a long pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. "Charlotte, I'm sorry I made you the strong one." My eyes filled instantly. Because she was right. I had been the strong one in our family for so long that it became my identity. It became my job. Even my mother, without meaning to, had treated my strength like it was endless. I swallowed hard. Mom, I see it now, she whispered. I see how much you carried. Violet's crises, my grief, your father's anger. You carried it because you could. And I let you. Tears slid down my face. I didn't know how to not carry it, I admitted. My mother sniffed. You're learning. Yes, I whispered. I am. After we hung up, I sat at the table and let myself cry quietly. Not because Violet had shown up. Because my mother had finally named what had been true for my whole life. And naming a truth is sometimes the beginning of changing it. A few days later, a certified letter arrived. From Patricia. A cease-and-desist addressed to Violet. Plain language. Clear consequences. Do not contact. Do not approach. Do not trespass. I stared at the envelope for a long time before forwarding the PDF copy to my mother. I didn't ask her permission. I wasn't negotiating my safety anymore. My mother replied with one line. I understand. I'll make sure she gets it. That weekend, Daniel texted, walk later? If you want. I stared at the message, warmth spreading in my chest. Then I typed, yes. Thank you. We walked as the sun set, the sky streaked with pale pink and gray. The air was cold enough to make our breath visible. We talked about simple things, his students, my work, the fact that winter always made the town feel smaller. At one point, Daniel said, you know, you don't have to tell me everything. I glanced at him. I know. He smiled. But you can. If you ever want to. My throat tightened. Thank you, I said again, because gratitude seemed to be the only honest word I had left for kindness. Daniel nodded. Anytime. When I got home after the walk, I stood on my porch for a moment and looked at my door. Locked. Solid. Protected. Then I looked across the street at Daniel's house, lights glowing warm in his windows. And I realized something else. The last year had taught me that family can betray you. But it had also taught me that community can show up. That trust can be rebuilt, not by grand promises, but by consistent, respectful presence. I went inside and hung my coat up. Then I touched the locket again. And I whispered into the quiet house, not as a prayer, not as a plea, but as a statement. I'm safe. The words didn't erase the past, but they created a present I could live in. After the cease and desist, the world got quieter. Not immediately. Not perfectly. But quieter in the way a storm gets quieter when the wind finally shifts and you can feel the pressure changing, even if the sky is still gray. Violet didn't show up again. No porch visits. No workplace ambush. No anonymous cards tucked into my mailbox. My mother didn't bring her up unless it was unavoidable. When she did, it was brief and factual, like we were speaking about a distant relative, not the sister who had once been my best friend. She's angry, my mother told me once, voice tired. She says you're punishing her. And I simply replied, no. I'm protecting myself. My father, interestingly, softened, not toward Violet, but toward the whole situation. He stopped talking like he wanted to launch himself into violence and started talking like a man who finally understood what control meant. Your mother and I are figuring out our own boundaries, he said one evening over dinner. We should have done it a long time ago. The sentence had weight. Because it meant the family wasn't trying to shove the burden back onto my shoulders. It meant we were all, in our own way, learning how to live in the aftermath of what Violet and Ethan had detonated. Patricia handled the legal side in steady increments. Ethan's attorney tried again to bargain, tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, tried to offer a partial repayment in exchange for closing the motion quickly. Patricia was unflinching. This isn't a negotiation about feelings, she told me on the phone. This is a question of what was taken. When the settlement offer came in writing, I read it twice, then replied through Patricia, proceed. No drama. No back and forth. Just proceed. And then, in late April, something unexpected happened. The judge ordered Ethan to repay the funds. Not all at once, structured payments, legal language, an official schedule. But the decision was clear. He owed. He would pay. Patricia called me with the news, her voice crisp. It's done, she said. You won. I stared out my kitchen window at the new green buds on the trees. I don't feel like I won, I admitted. Patricia snorted softly. You're not supposed to feel victorious. This isn't a game. But you were right. And the court agreed. That matters. I swallowed hard. Thank you. Patricia's voice softened just slightly. You did the hard part. You held the line. After I hung up, I sat at my table and stared at my hands. $12,000. In the scale of a lifetime, it wasn't everything. But it was symbolic. It was proof that the damage was real and measurable. Proof that the betrayal wasn't just something you move on from with a few apologies and some therapy sessions. It had consequences. And for the first time, the consequences weren't only mine to carry. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't open champagne or blast music. I made dinner. I washed dishes. I watered the plants. Then I stepped outside and sat on my porch as the sky darkened and the first fireflies of the season blinked faintly in the yard. I breathed in the damp spring air and felt, in a small quiet way, that something had been returned to me. Not money. Dignity. The next part of my life began without fanfare. It started with a Saturday morning hike. Daniel texted me, "A few of us are doing the trails by the reservoir. You in?" I hesitated only a moment before replying, yes. The hike was simple, muddy paths, budding trees, birds loud with spring. Daniel walked beside me at an easy pace, never rushing, never pulling ahead. At one point we stopped at an overlook where the water stretched out silver blue under the sky. A breeze lifted my hair off my neck. Daniel leaned on the railing and said, "This is my favorite part." "The view?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "The quiet. People are still people, but out here it's less complicated." I laughed softly. I could use less complicated. Daniel's eyes flicked to mine, warm. Me too. We stood there a moment, and something gentle happened between us. Not a confession. Not a leap. Just a shared exhale. On the walk back, we ended up slightly behind the others. Daniel asked, carefully, "Do you ever miss them?" I knew who he meant. I took my time answering. "I miss who I thought they were," I said. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I miss having a sister I could call at midnight," I admitted. "I miss believing my husband was safe." Daniel's expression was soft, but he didn't try to fix it. "I don't miss the reality," I added. "Good," he said quietly. When we reached the parking lot, Daniel hesitated, then said, "I want to ask you something, and you can absolutely say no." I felt a flicker of anxiety, old reflex. "Okay," I said cautiously. Daniel smiled. "Would you want to have dinner?" "Just us." Not as a neighbor thing. As a, "I'd like to know you more" thing. My heart did a small, strange jump. Not fear. Not dread. Nervousness, yes. But the kind that comes with possibility. I stared at him, processing. For a second, the old alarms in my brain tried to ring. Don't trust. Don't risk. Don't let someone close. Then another voice answered, steadier, quieter. You can choose slowly. You can say yes without giving away your whole life. "I'd like that," I said. Daniel's smile widened, but he didn't make a big deal of it. He just nodded, like this was a normal, respectful thing. "Friday?" he asked. "Friday," I agreed. Friday dinner wasn't dramatic. He cooked real food, not just takeout. Pasta with vegetables and bread he'd baked himself, slightly lopsided but delicious. We ate at his kitchen table under warm light, music low in the background. We talked about our childhoods. His was quieter, only child, lots of books. Mine was loud, two sisters, a mother who hummed while she cleaned, a father who fixed everything with his hands. We didn't talk about Ethan or Violet. Not because it was forbidden, because it wasn't the center anymore. After dinner, we sat on his porch with mugs of tea. The night air was mild, the neighborhood quiet. Daniel looked at me then, serious. "I'm not trying to replace anything you lost," he said. I like you." My throat tightened. I nodded. "I like you too." He smiled softly. "Good." And then he did something that made my chest ache. He asked, "May I hold your hand?" Not grabbing. Not assuming. Asking. Consent in its simplest, kindest form. I stared at his hand for a moment. Then I placed mine in his. His fingers were warm. Steady. My body didn't panic. It didn't recoil. It just accepted. For a while, we sat like that in silence, listening to crickets, the world breathing around us. And in that moment, I realized trust doesn't come back as a lightning strike. It comes back like this: a question, a choice, a hand offered, not taken. When I went home later, I stood on my porch for a moment, looking at my front door, the locks, the camera. Then I looked across the street at Daniel's house, his lights dimming as he went inside. I felt something bloom in my chest, small, careful, alive. Not the old naive hope. The wiser hope. The one that says, I can love again, but I will love with boundaries. I can open my door, but I choose who enters. I can trust, but I will trust those who earn it. That night, I slept deeply. No nightmares. No racing heart. Just rest. And in the morning, when sunlight spilled across my bedroom floor, I knew the final truth of my new life. My sister and my husband broke my past, but they did not get my future. If you made it to the end, thank you for sitting with me through all of that. If you've ever had to set a boundary that broke your heart, hit like so I know I'm not alone. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories about betrayal, healing, and starting over. And tell me in the comments, would you have ever spoken to Violet again, or is that door closed forever?